Okay, so we're going to call this meeting to order. It's 7:02 on October 23rd. This is Andrew Basil in attendance. Mark Boyer, Kim Seldamridge, Tamara Twardowski, Monica Hamill, Dr. Otto, and a member from the public, Shane Cockle. And so I guess we'll get started with the agenda.
Before we do that, may I just a quick overview for the benefit of the public that may be listening to this. I'd like to introduce our new, call him helper from PASBO. As you know, I had to, Denny Youngkin ran into some situations with Social Security and his own personal situation, so he had to kind of bow out. He would have stayed on, but he was unable to do that. Kim has stepped in under the same contractual arrangement we have with PASBO, so he's here through PASBO, and he's really come in and picked up where Denny left off. And the presentation that you see before you, the first thing we're going to start, was pretty much put together by Kim. Kim, why don't you take a little bit of time to tell everybody about your background? I think Kim's probably going to be with us for a little while based on how long he can be here and until we finally make our decision on a business manager. So Kim, just a brief overview.
I spent 32 years in education. The first two were at the Department of Education as a budget analyst, and my job was to go out and do on-site visitations, basically to help school districts. I spent 5 years at Donegal School District as their business manager and 25 years at Conestoga Valley School District in Lancaster County as their director of administration. Graduated from Shippensburg with a master's in public administration and Geneva College with a Bachelor of Arts. Married with 3 grown children.
And I can only say he's been really, I've actually, in the short time I've worked with him, actually learned more about the business function. And he has some interesting information to share with us tonight that I think represents really a good underpinning of information as we move forward with what appears to be another testy and difficult budget situation, but that's pretty typical across the state right now. So I'm going to let Kim take the floor here, and obviously you guys, as you have questions and comments, I'll let Kim, answer them for you, or we can answer them as well. So Kim, why don't you talk about what you did for us here?
All right, thank you. Well, first of all, these meetings typically is it very formal last name or first name basis, or?
It's usually pretty casual at the committee meetings, but
Okay.
I mean, you can call me Andrew.
I'm fine with Monica.
Okay, that's
Okay.
easier for me. I appreciate that. That's how we usually ran things at Conestoga Valley. We're a little more formal.
Yeah, I think when we get to the public meeting, I mean that the committee of the whole and the voting meetings, we typically it's a Mr. this and a Miss that. But you'll hear first names come out of my mouth with regularity. I tend to drop the surname pretty quickly.
Okay. All
I don't know why. Just do.
We're just interested in ideas.
Yeah.
All right. Are you going to be my slide turner, Mark? All right. You're already at birth rates. Well, I thought when I came here, I started actually first, or it was the second week in October, and one of the things that I noticed was that there weren't any long-range forecasts of your enrollment projection, and it's pretty hard to plan long-range for a budget if you don't know how many kids are coming down the pike. And this is a process that I used at Conestoga Valley for many, many years. When I first got there, it was done by our director of curriculum. He felt very uneasy with statistics, and so I took it over within a few years of being there. And I use mainly birth rates, the birth rate data I get from the Department of Health, and then I use something called actual survival ratios, which we have found at CV to be pretty accurate. Our projections have kept us out of a lot of trouble for the past 25 years that I've been here. And so what I have up here for you on the first slide is the birth rates for Daniel Boone School District. That includes Union Township, Birdsboro, and Amity. You can get these from the Department of Health. They're a little slow in coming out. Like I was hoping that for tonight's meeting I'd have 2012 birth data. They said it'd be ready by the end of October. So I guess their interpretation of the end of October is October 30th. But you can see what's clear indication. If you look at your birth data, you have a 4-year decline in your birth data or your birth rates, and that's significant. At many districts, you may see a 1 or 2 year decline, and then it goes up. There's kind of ups and downs, and you can see in your past history there have been ups and downs, and a lot of this is based on building projects, neighborhoods that are built up, and you probably can figure out just by looking at the statistics what neighborhoods were built in 1999 and 2000, and even in the early 2000s. But we have checked with the townships, and the building permits are pretty flat. Over the past 3 years, there have been about 45 to 50 residential building permits, and that's our projection for the next few years. So building is off. It's at the same level for the future as it is now. So let's go to the next slide, Mark. The other thing that's very important is the survival ratios. And basically what a survival ratio is how many kids survive from one grade to the next, or from birth to kindergarten. Let's use the year 2013-14. You can see the survival ratio, and these are by years going across 08, 09, all the way down to our current year, 2013-14. And you can see that the survival ratio for 2013 is 0.921 for kindergarten. Well, what does that mean? Well, basically, you take the number of births associated 5 years prior to that, and for kindergarten, for example, in 2008, there were 267 births. 247 kids showed up from those 267 births, so that means your survival ratio is 0.921, because you divide the 267 by the 247. The 246 by the 267, you get 0.92. For first grade, it's basically the number of kindergarten kids that go from kindergarten to first grade. And you can see the number is slightly higher than 1. It's 1.079. And that's because in 2012-13, you had 229 kids in kindergarten. And in 2013-14, you had 247 first graders show up. So that means, where did those first graders come from? Well, the likely scenario is that some parents chose not to send their kids to kindergarten.
I think what you're going to see, Kim, is, I don't want to interrupt you, I'm not disagreeing with you, but like in 12-13, we went to half-day kindergarten from full-day kindergarten.
Right.
And then same thing in 13-14. So to see a drop there is not surprising as far as I'm concerned, because a lot of parents decide they were going to take their kids to a private. Right. And what we're interested in is, are those kids coming back? Which, if you have a ratio in excess of 1, it looks like some of them did come back to us in first grade.
Okay.
That's the way I would interpret that data. I mean, maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong in that interpretation.
No, because that you notice I have that area highlighted, and you can see that it was pretty consistent, that you had all the kids coming, and then all of a sudden in 12-13 it drops down to 0.845.
Right.
So something obviously occurred there. It was probably the fact that you did go to half-day kindergarten, and some parents decided to send them somewhere else. So yes, I would agree with your conclusion. The other thing that I highlighted was grade 6. A lot of times with survival ratios, you're going to see variations from year to year, ups and downs, because you have withdrawals, you have entrances, you have people moving in, you have people moving out. And so most of the time you're going to see numbers going up and down with no set pattern. But when you see a trend, and you do that in grade 6, it goes from 0.065, and each year it trends downward with a slight little bump in 2011-12, down to 0.99. That means from 5th grade to middle school, you have less children that are transferring over. I don't know what the explanation is for that. Maybe you have more children going to non-public schools. It'd be interesting to look at your non-public statistics. Or you have more kids at that grade going to charter schools or cyber schools. A good thing to analyze would be, what's your cyber school population doing? What's your charter school population doing? The same thing seems to be starting to happen with the high school as well. You had basically ones going across, and now the past 2 years it's dropped down to 0.95. Is that a trend, or is it just an anomaly? It's too early to tell. But there's definitely a trend in grade 6. You definitely can see the effects of going to half-day kindergarten in 2012-13. The question is, is that going to go back up to 1, or is it going to stay there? So that's a very good question.
Can I ask you a question? Should we be looking at this diagonally in the sense that the kids that are in kindergarten in 08, 09 are the first graders in 9, 10 that are the second graders in 10, 11, and be looking at to see if there's consistency with that particular cohort?
Now, I would look at it horizontally, straight across, because the survival ratios are measuring the information diagonally.
I see.
Okay. So basically, this 0.99 represents in 12, 13, these kids going to here, so you lost a couple.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on survival ratios? So yeah, if the number's above 1, you're gaining kids from one grade to the next. If it's below 1, you're losing kids. If it's at 1, basically,
It's flat.
300 kids in grade 5 and 300 kids show up the next year, it would be 1.
Looks like we're seeing that in the senior, well, I guess the senior classes.
Well, that's not unusual to see the senior class dropping off because you have kids dropping out of school.
Right.
That's very common to see numbers below 1 in grade 12 and even grade 11.
But really, over the last 5 years, with the exception of 9, 10, we've lost, on average, we've lost kids.
Yes. And again, that's pretty normal. Okay. Go to historical enrollment. This is how the survival ratios were developed again. 284 to 274 would develop a number below 1. 274 to 281 would develop a survival ratio above 1. So that's your history. What it shows is basically your enrollment for elementary peaking in 2009-10 at 1,829 students. And in the middle school, it peaked at 2011-12, and the high school peaked around the same year, maybe a year before, 2010-11.
Yeah,
So
that was
that's your history.
Yeah, we have a little population bubble that was moving through the school district.
Exactly. Let's go to the next slide. The important thing for planning purposes is where are things going. You use the history, you use what you know about your district, and what we've had a chance to explore. Ken Smith was a big help in talking to the townships. Where are things headed? Obviously, you want to build those into your equations. You decide what survival ratios to use. Because things have been consistent over the past 3 years and in the future, what's really driving these numbers down are your birth rates. Because even if you add, say, 40 new homes over the next 3 years, which is what they're saying, or 50 homes, that's maybe 15 or 20 homes a year. It's the same as you had in the previous 3 years, so it's going to be basically consistent. And if you look at statistics, out of a single-family home, you get about 0.6 school-age child out of each home. And so if you build 10 homes a year, you're only looking at maybe 6 additional children.
So you say, I'm sorry, it's 0.6 children out of each new home built?
Out of each single-family home, it's about 0.665.
Total single families.
Apartments, that number goes down a little bit. Townhouses, about the same.
0.65. Okay.
Apartment complexes are usually about 0.35. So based on your birth data, you can see that your future projections for elementary are dropping from 1,592 to 1,336. And that's based on kids that have been born in Daniel Boone School District. So it's going to be pretty accurate. Even if you build, again, these homes that are coming, because of the consistency to the past, this looks pretty clear. Unless someone sells a farm in the next few years and builds a 400 house development in a couple of years, these numbers won't change drastically. Middle school, your current population is 920. That's trending down to 772. Your high school is going from 1147 down to 1084. So your total population of students is going from 3,659 down to about 3,192 in about 5 years. So what are the implications to that? Well, obviously there's staffing implications associated with decreased enrollment. You don't need as much staff. There's implications for your facilities. You currently have 3 elementary schools, which has a total capacity of 1,850. So you're going to be looking at possibly your facilities. It affects transportation. We've already had discussions, Mark, Gary, and I, about looking at the transportation routes and seeing how we can optimize those, because with decreased numbers, you need as many buses. So there's a lot of implications to this. This is important data that you should be looking at. So.
Well,
Now-
you came up.
Go ahead.
You had the capacity. You said facilities, and then the capacity. What was that number?
Well, I have the capacity for Amity International. This is based off of full-time equivalency numbers that were developed by the Department of Education. Amity's at 750.
That's AEC.
Yeah, Amity Intermediate, not the other Amity. Birdsboro is at 650, and
Monocacy.
Monocacy, thank
He
you.
hasn't been around here long enough
I haven't
yet.
been around here long enough. Monocacy is at 450, so that's a total of 1,850.
If you read between the lines, it's pretty easy to figure out what's going to have to happen.
Well, that doesn't even include the AIC, right?
That doesn't even include APC.
And APC is what?
Yeah, I'm confused.
What's
What's-
do you have APC's capacity?
400, I think. It's 300 some. We looked up the capacities of all the
And the
schools.
Birdsboro is BEC, right? Is that the
Correct.
one? Okay. Am I-
The capacity of Amity Elementary Center, which was closed, is 300.
And what was the middle school and the high school? Do you know those?
Middle school is 1,280, and the high school is 1,442.
We calculated the total available spaces.
No, I'm glad you did. That's important
What was the high
information.
school
to have.
again?
The total capacity,
1,442.
total facilities capacity in the district is currently at 4,800 students.
Now that's packed, but
Right.
that's the capacity.
That's the maximum capacity, 4,800 students.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Unless you have any more questions about enrollment.
No, I just heard the number and I wasn't
Yeah.
exactly sure what it was.
Yeah. I put together some community and financial factors to sort of build a foundation for your budget process, understanding that you want to start that in November. And so these are some things that just to put into consideration as you begin thinking about the budget for 2014-15. What I developed for you in this slide is I know the school boards that I work for have always wanted to see how they compare to the neighbors. The blue bar represents the tax rate for all the school districts in Berks County. You have 18 school districts in Berks County, and you can see Daniel Boone ranks 7th. From the highest, Antietam, which is at 34.56 mils, to Reading, which is at 16.92. Now, Reading's an anomaly in the sense that it's an urban district that gets a lot of additional support from the state because of its distressed status. And so it's really, you can almost, cut that one off and
take
say,
it off the
okay,
chart.
that's so different, it doesn't really even relate. But if you divide it into 3 tiers, you got 18 districts, 6 to a tier. Daniel Boone's in the middle tier. It ranks 7th in Berks County, and that's pretty good when you consider its comparative wealth to all the other districts.
Now, how do you measure comparative wealth? Is that with this aid ratio that
Yeah,
you're
let's
using?
go to the next slide. This is the school districts ranked by comparative wealth, and this is a ratio that the state has used for decades to measure the comparative wealth of a district to its neighbors. And what it does is it takes your market value, divides it by the total state market value, all across the state, divides that by your average daily for your attendance, WADMs, weighted average daily membership, and then it takes your personal income and does the same thing. It takes 60% of the market value, it takes 40% of the personal income, and it develops what's referred to as a market value of personal income aid ratio. Now, they used to, in the 70s and 80s, the money from the state was driven strictly by that formula. And they would reverse it, they would inverse it, and in fact, they would take that ratio and they would put a 1 in front of it and subtract that ratio from it to invert it. And basically the concept was that the poorer districts would get a higher ratio. Reading, you can see, is close to 90%. In fact, if you just did the market value portion of this, took out the personal income, this doesn't change that much. It's still pretty much ranked the same way. But what it does, it says to the state, Reading, compared to its neighbors in comparative wealth, is poorer than the rest of its neighbors. And so it should be getting more money. And so the ratio was, the intent of it was the state was supposed to support states 50%. And so if you had an aid ratio of 50%, you would get 50. The idea was 50% of your revenue would come from the state. If you had an aid ratio like Reading of 80%, 80% of your revenue would come from the state, so you could rely less on the taxpayer and the district. What this is saying is, as far as relative wealth, Daniel Boone is 3rd from the poorest district.
So we're the 3rd poorest district, but the 7th highest tax district in the county.
Correct. And the problem is that the state hasn't come through with that commitment of 50%. For example, Daniel Boone's ratio is 59%, right under 60. So theoretically, they should be getting 59% of the revenue from the state. You want to guess how much you're getting?
14%.
That's a little higher. If you throw in all the other subsidies like transportation and the pension, it's about 33. But that's why it's not working. And the other thing is they basically don't use the formula anymore. The foundation of your basic education subsidy still comes from that, but they don't use the actual math to do it anymore. It's basically just a 2% increase in the prior year, a 2% increase in the prior year, a 2% increase. So they haven't used the actual formula for a decade or more. And so you can look at this one or two ways. You can say, well, if we're the third poorest as far as market value and personal income, where should our tax rate be? Should it be 3rd from the bottom, or does, because the state isn't giving its portion, does there need to be a larger tax effort from your community? That's obviously a philosophical question. But it does have, to know that kind of information does have a bearing on that decision. The other thing that it should have a bearing on, a high bearing on, is we use this data all the time when we negotiate with teachers. You show your teachers, well, listen, we can't afford what you're asking because here's where we are in relationship to our neighbors. It's an excellent tool at the negotiation table. So that's another area that I would recommend using it, is the negotiations. Any questions on this? Is this the first time you've seen this data?
I think well, I know I've looked at historically by going to the Department of Labor and Industry and taking a look at the economic data on what the average compensation is and median income and things of that nature for our school district over the last number of years, and looked at that. I think it's like $42,000 or $43,000 total per household on average, and then you look at the highs and lows, and I've statistically seen it's been declining over time, and then compared that data to neighboring school districts, and then done basically just a mental look at it, and compared our tax rates with our other neighbors, including not just school district wise, but also took a look at municipal taxes as well. So, Amity, Union, Birdsboro all have different tax structures, and then in Birdsboro they've got a whole other issue with their sewer and water billing on top of that. So at the end of the day, when you total all those things up for that particular income bracket, you would I was looking at what the total percentage of your income was being consumed by taxes. And it was, I forget, like 56% of your household income was going to taxes, which was, I thought, a disproportionate share vis-a-vis other school districts in the area.
Yeah.
It's a different way of looking at it, but I'm curious, is there some sort of, has the state or Department of Education, or if you looked at statistically across the state of Pennsylvania, is there some sort of benchmark ratio that people would look at and say, well, your tax rates should really be a certain percentage of your, of your aid ratio or something to that effect? Is there?
No, there really is. I'm sure you can collect data and see where like someone with comparable to Daniel Boone, 59%, where are their tax rates? It's hard to compare because each county has different.
The millage is different.
The millages are different, so it's a difficult comparison to make. So you have to do it on basically local revenue, what you collect, and there's some variables in that would make it difficult as well. I can tell you from in the county that I worked in, I know those districts, obviously those districts that were on this end of the spectrum, their tax rates were generally higher because they had to supplement what the state was not giving them to balance off this sort of Robin Hood policy or Robin Hood mentality, which is a good mentality to have, but because the state wasn't coming through with the commitment of 50%, basically they went to local taxpayers, and generally what you saw were higher tax rates up here and lower tax rates here because these were generating much more per mill than these people were. If that makes sense. You have to make it up somewhere.
That, or you look at the standard of living and make adjustments that way too, right? So you can't afford to pay, if you're in a place where your standard of living is considerably less, you can't afford to have the expenses that a wealthier district does.
Exactly. Let's go to the next slide.
This is good information. Thank you for compiling it.
Oh, you're welcome. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed putting this stuff together. Some basic revenue information, and it's interesting coming from another county and looking at this stuff because generally speaking, we had 1% growth a year, 2% growth a year was normal. In Berks County, for some reason, I even talked to Mark about this because he worked for the county for a few years. I don't know what the specific answer is, but growth in Berks County, from an assessed value standpoint, is a lot slower than Lancaster County for sure. I don't know the reason for that, but Daniel Boone obviously doesn't escape that. Over the past 4 years, basically your growth in assessed value, or the value that the county assigns to properties, has been zero.
Could that also be due to a lot of people appealing their assessments?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously with the economy, there was a flood of appeals going through. I'm sure that was going on in Lancaster County as well.
Well, it was, but it was mostly going on at the commercial and industrial level, not at the residential level. Where I understand that there was this was also going on in the residential.
Yeah,
level
here at the
Mercer
residential
County.
level, it was very,
Right.
yeah, very active.
Right, and that could be a reason for it. The value of the current mill for Daniel Boone is $963,799. The average value of a single family, well, no, I shouldn't say that. Average value of a residential property in Daniel Boone is $119,738. So if you went to try to find the average house in your school district, it would be assessed in your county at $119,738.
And I think that used to be 123,000.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just 3 or 4 years ago, it was like $123,000.
So it's dropped then.
Oh,
And you
yeah.
have had some assessment appeals.
Absolutely.
The Act 1 index this year is 2.8%. Your current millage rate is 28.9618. Just for information purposes, if you went to the Act 1 index for your 14-15 budget, that would be 0.81 mils. If you took that 0.81 mils and multiplied it by this average, you could say that the average single or the average residential property would have a tax increase of $97. And that would generate about $780,000 in revenue. Another important note that I observed was that budgeted for 2013-14 is using $2.2 million as the fund balance. Most likely it won't be $2.2 million. It'll probably be $2 million to maybe 1.5, somewhere in that neighborhood, hopefully. We just got this today. The unaudited ending fund balance for 2012-13 is $4,492,210, which is about a $146,000 increase over last year. That's excellent to be that close. Your expenditures and your revenues are within the percent of what you budgeted. That's excellent budgeting by any standard, any imagination. That has been done with great accuracy.
Okay, so we're going to ask you to repeat that statement verbatim, word for word, in December or January when we have our next budget meeting in front of the public, because most people don't seem to think that we're doing a very good job with that.
Well, if you figure you have probably 5,000 different accounts, and each one you've got to put a budget number there, and you try to nail each budget number, each account on the dot. Now, some of them you can, like debt service, probably pretty easy because you know what your bond debt schedule is. Salaries is you can't nail it because you don't know who's going to retire, who's going to leave,
Who's
Taking
taking out maternity?
classes,
fraternities, whatever. You can't predict that. Healthcare, you're self-funded. There's no way to predict with absolute accuracy what you're going to spend in healthcare. Social Security, you can get pretty accurate with that. You can get pretty accurate with retirement, but that's based on how much you spend on salaries. Energy, well, we all know that you have a mild winter, you're going to spend less. If you have a cold winter, you're going to spend more. Supplies and books, small percentage of your budget should be pretty accurate. But there's absolutely no way that anybody should expect you to be right on the money. It's impossible when you have 5,000 different accounts that you're budgeting for. And various revenue sources.
Let me just ask a quick question, because the last time we sat here in September, or maybe it was even August, when we were doing sort of the variance report on our budget, we had a $700,000 surplus on a budget that we had expected to spend $1.3 million from our general fund. So it's like a $2 million swing. You're telling us, well, it's $140,000 something. So in my head, is this have something to do with the debt payment that was made?
The debt payment would have been made, would have been $700,000.
Which is why we ended up at 140 something. Okay, so in essence, it's
The
still the
defeasance.
$700,000. No, it's not the defeasance. It was the early debt payment.
It was early debt payment. The problem is that, the instructions that...
I know, yeah, the instruction we have,
And, so,
and why they decided to do it on July 1st and not on a different date.
Right.
I mean, they can set those bond issues for whatever date they think is appropriate. So that was just poor decision making all along when that bond issue was done. So,
yeah. So if it's consistently done 5 days before, it's not going to be it's not going to be an issue from here going out because you'll just do it consistently the way it's supposed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go to the next slide. This is something that I found that I would be concerned about. If you go back to the previous slide where it looked at the comparison of Danny Boon's wealth versus its neighbors, your teacher contract should be ideally somewhere in the same neck of the woods. In other words, Danny Boone shouldn't be number one. It should be down here somewhere. And unfortunately, that's really just the tip of the iceberg. This is the this salary that in 2013, this year, a master's degree teacher would get with 20 years experience. And you figure the average life career of a teacher is 35 years. That means for most of the years that they teach, they're going to be at that highest step. That's also the same with Masters Plus 30. And it doesn't get better because in 2014-15, salary increases for teachers is at 6%, and that's the highest of any district that's has a negotiated contract in 2014-15. And so this is going to be a major drain on finances this year and next year. At a very difficult time, and I just wanted to point that out to everyone.
I would love to see this slide when you add in pension and health benefits to it,
Right.
because you're compounding it. It's exponential,
Right.
and because I think we figured right now our average compensation per teacher has been increasing at a rate of $10,000 per teacher per year. So last year was $85,000. This year it's $95,000. Next year it's $105,000.
Right.
Multiply that by 278 teachers, and our budget's moving at $2.5 million a pop.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good segue into the next slide. This is your pension costs by dollar amount over the next few years. 11-12, it was $1.8 million, $1.9 million. PSER's actuarial projection, which is extremely accurate, has those costs going to $8,468,000. So you're exactly right. When your salaries are higher, right now this year it's 16.93% of payroll. Next year it's 21.3% of payroll. And if your payroll's higher, this has an exponential effect on your cost of your pension. And so during this period, during this steep climb, you can see it's going to be very difficult because you're talking about basically from 13-14 to 14-15, $1.3 million increase in your pension costs. That's more than what you pay for in your salaries. Now, there is legislation that has some traction that may level this off. It's not the best legislation. It involves some pension bonds, which basically is borrowing money to pay current costs, which is not a good idea. I wouldn't recommend that personally for any of you or myself. It's almost like getting another credit card to cover your existing credit card. But it's getting traction. If that happens, it'll probably level off at this level and go straight across instead of keep climbing. It'll probably level off. This is about 25% of payroll. And so this will be topped off if that passes. But it's not going to help you for next year. And it's not going to help you in 15-16. And until that's passed, we sort of have to use this as our guide. Any questions on? The other thing I'll tell you is this is mandated. As a school board, you have no control over this. This is all done by our state politicians, and I could spend an evening going on that just on that one issue alone, how we got into this mess. is solely on decisions that our state politicians made. In 2001 and 2004, obviously the two recessions exacerbated it, but it's a mess. It's a total mess.
Well, the state didn't hold a gun to our head to sign a contract that we signed, so that the underlying contract is what's exasperating the pension liabilities the district has to face.
Right. All right, let's go to the next slide.
Can I say, even if there's legislation that would lower it, that's still just kicking the can, right? I mean,
Exactly.
all right.
Yeah, it's kicking the can down the road. It'll
Eventually,
be yeah.
the district has to come up with that money.
Eventually, they do. Right, contractually, they've gone through trials with this. They've gone through the judicial system, and Pennsylvania basically said you made a contract, you got to fulfill it. So you're exactly right, Tamara. If they pass this thing and chop this thing off, this is supposed to level off like in 2039. Well, instead of leveling off in 2039, it'll probably be 2045 or whatever until they make up for it. Excellent point. Okay, next slide. Major expenditure items. We talked about the pension at 1.3. Now, fortunately, the state has historically paid 50% of this, so the net cost would be $650,000 if you want to factor in the revenue on the state side. But obviously, that's taxpayer money too. It just comes in through a different pocket. Negotiated increase for teachers in 2014-15 is 6%, the highest in the county. And the teacher increase costs will be over $1 million for 2014-15 based on your current staff. Healthcare, I didn't factor that in yet because we really don't have good numbers on what our healthcare costs will be. But you could add another $300,000 for all the other benefits, Social Security, healthcare, unemployment.
I'd be interested to know if you guys have an opportunity between now and December, I'd be interested to know how our contract increases historically since this new contract went in 4 years ago now, compared to not only Berks County, but say, Montgomery County, Chester County as well, because we border those others.
Right.
I mean, it's one thing to sit there and say, well, this is how it is versus Berks. And I knew it was the highest in Berks County, but, we've seen...
Didn't we take a preliminary look at that?
We did. It's hard to get the information unless you work for PSCA. But based on talking to business managers that are closer to Philadelphia in Montgomery County, they do have contracts. I think the highest salary by the end of 2014 for the highest educational level for Daniel Boone is like $96,000. I know that in Montgomery County, those counties surrounding
Bucks
Philadelphia,
County,
they're in the six-figure digits. So yeah, you do have some competition. Like doesn't Boyertown cross both Berks County and Montgomery County? But yet their salaries are lower than yours.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if you go closer to Philadelphia, Montgomery,
You're also looking at, people in Montgomery County, Lower Marion and stuff whose the median income isn't $42,000
Exactly.
a household. It's $120,000 a household.
Right.
So it's a whole different ball game there. Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Some preliminary conclusions, basically a summary of what we've talked about this evening. You have declining enrollment. I have no doubt about that. You have flat local revenue growth. Even your EIT has been pretty flat. Your benefit costs and salary costs next year are easily going to reach $2.6 million if you have current staffing. You're probably going to be $2 million, as I said, $1.5 to $2 million of your fund balance in 2013-14, which is a one-time revenue source. So normally, what you try to do, and you can't always do it, but if you can, it's best to tie this to obviously a one-time expenditure, like maybe new computers or something to that effect. Because once you spend the $2 million, it's not there anymore. And so the following year, it sort of exacerbates the situation and makes things worse. That's a big concern. And so the bottom line is for 14-15, you know, you can use the rest of the fund balance to balance the budget along with some budget major budget cuts and crash in 2015-16, or we can bring this into a more controlled landing through a combination of expenditure cuts and increasing tax revenues. I don't, at this point, I don't see it any other way. We are going through, Dr. Otto, Mr. Boyer and myself are going through line item by line item on your budgets to try to find every nickel and every dime we can. I know Gary's working on staffing recommendations for November. Obviously, when your enrollment's going down, there will be some staff savings. But we're going to be looking at cost-saving initiatives and everywhere we can to try to, you know, close the gap. But preliminarily, I don't see you being able to do that with any extent of fiduciary responsibility without some sort of tax increase.
So I guess the question that we have, you know, at least from the finance committee is, and we've been refining our, like each year we do our budget. It's been a terrible process. So like when I first got on the board, nobody worked on the budgets. It was take 5% added to the previous budget, not actual costs, and then just roll your budget forward type of thing. There was no multi-year projections. And over time, we've at least, I think, gotten much better at honing in on what our actual costs are or were, what they are, and what we project them to be for the following year. We still haven't migrated to a multi-year budget, although we're working on that model finally this year. I guess the question I have that you guys can, you know, hopefully take a look at is every year we turn around, we do an autopsy on the prior year and say, okay, well, where did we under budget? You know, and where do we over budget? In particular, over budgeting is where we seem to be still at. And in the last meeting we had, we were talking about contingencies, how every single line item seemed to have its own sort of contingency built into it. And as a result of that, we were throwing surpluses in lots of smaller line items, in particular in supplies and things of that nature, to the tune of, I think, out of the $700,000 surplus we threw, like $300,000 or $400,000, which, you know, general supplies. Is that right, Mark? Am I summing that up correctly?
Some of it is in general supplies, yes.
Yeah, so we're going to take a good hard look at those types of things. And I think from our perspective was we're sitting every year, our fund balance is going up. We keep saying we're going to spend fund balance. We put fund balance in the formula. You know, we're going to spend 1.3, and we end up throwing a surplus. We said we're going to spend $1 million. We throw a surplus of 100,000. We say we're going to do this, and there's been outliers for that. We got some money from, you know, the bailout. We had a defeasance one year. It was another 800,000. So it's been these random outliers that sort of come to the rescue to save us. I'm not confident there's going to be another random outlier this year that will save us. But I guess what I'm curious about is, are there things that you guys can already look at that we learned from last year, 12-13, going into 13-14, to say, you know what, we're not going to spend these dollars. So we're not going to be at $2.3 million, which is I think what we projected to spend out of fund balance. We're going to be looking at maybe it's 1.5 or it's 1 point whatever. So we have a little bit more money in the fund balance at the end of this year, because I think at least we'll have a new set of people sitting at the table in a matter of a month or so. But the philosophy of the current board was we've got to get to the other side of this contract. And the contract we currently have ends in 14-15. And if we can get to the other side of that contract without punishing the taxpayer, at least there's an opportunity to hit the reset button going forward. So how do we get to the other side? It's been through program cuts and fund balance is how we've tried to get there, because prior to that we had an exponential increase in taxes. And since then, we sort of plateaued on the tax increase thing, and we've been using more fund balance and program cutting and wasteful spending cutting and stuff like that to kind of balance the budget from one year to the next. And so I think we do need a long-term outlook, but we also have a very short-term goal too, which is if we can get beyond the contract, which seems to be artificially high, and get to a place where we can figure out what the sustained pattern of growth needs to be and what the sustained increase in taxes needs to be to match that, that's where we'd like to be. You know, so essentially we're bending the tax curve to try to match what it should be in terms of our sustained growth. And now we're trying to bend our expenditure growth to meet that same projection, because both of them been out of whack for the last 6 years.
Right.
And I don't know what your thoughts will be on that when you guys kind of put your heads together and you start talking about where we were and how we're trying to figure out, because at the end of the day, it's $10,000 here and it's $50,000 there, and we've been able to cobble, $500,000 together, which allows us to get away without a tax increase, because a tax increase at this point is only $700,000. I mean, that's
1% of your budget.
yeah. I mean, it's one program cut, or it's fund balance for one more year, and then we're there.
Let me say 3 things, and hopefully I remember all 3. Number 1 is, and you may know this off the top of your head, Mark, but I think, and I wanted to double check before I came in here this evening and ran out of time, but I think your surpluses were 12-13 and 11-12. Before that, I don't think you had surpluses. I think you had some deficit spending.
We threw a surplus of $682,000 in 08-7-8, $343,000 in 8-9. We threw a deficit in 9-10 of like $600, and then we threw $1 million surplus in 10-11, $116,000 in 11-12, and now 12-13 we're projecting theoretically a $700,000 surplus if you took that bond payment and you put it in the right place.
Okay.
So more surpluses than deficits.
Well, normally that's what you want, because one of the things that you're not allowed to do as a school administrator or as a school board is you're not allowed to spend over what you budget. And so you're always going to be a little conservative on the expenditure side, because basically in the school code it says your expenditures and revenues have to balance. You can't spend more than what's in your budget. You actually get cited for that. So you're always going to be a little bit conservative on the expenditure side. And so you want more surpluses, obviously, than you do deficits. Those surpluses can be used for future budgets. They can be used to pay for capital expenditures. We've done that before. The second point that I want to make is, as far as contingency funds, that's one thing that we're looking at. Just having one contingency fund instead of everybody having little contingency funds all over the place. The third thing is, when I present a budget, I always present it with a 5-year plan. And so if I am here in November and December, I'll be helping Gary and assisting in that endeavor.
Now, with the enrollment numbers you've just thrown out there as part of your 5-year plan, look, 2 years from now you ought to be closing another building. Your teacher, your employment ratio, right now you have 278 employees. That number should be down at 222. That's going to bend your salary curve down. So that's all part of that conversation.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because that's obviously got a huge impact on whether or not we need to raise taxes. And I think the board's sort of opinion in the past has been, it's very tough to sit there and say to people who are hurting in our community, and particularly this community where we don't have, it's not a wealthy community. Hey, look, we're gonna raise your taxes one more time, and then you turn around and throw another surplus. And people are sitting there saying, what's this $4 million for? Spend the $4 million, then come talk to me about needing more money. You know what I mean? And that's sort of the struggle that we've had.
Well, it's certainly something when you talk about spending all the $4 million, it's certainly not something that you would get a recommendation.
No one's recommending we spend it down to zero.
Right.
But I'm just saying it's very difficult to sit there and tell people we're going to raise your taxes again,
right,
and we're sitting on $4 million and throwing surpluses, 7 out of the last 8 years.
The best thing I think my recommendation is as best you can explain to the public, well, why do we have a surplus? One of the things that I did when I first got here was go through with Mark and try to explain why it looked like we were going to get a surplus in 12-13. I didn't want to present this morning or this evening because we don't have the final audit report yet. We've got a few pages of the draft, and we're pretty confident that the ending fund balance number, that's what it's going to be, threw that out. But we went through item by item. We'll bring that as part of the presentation. Why in 12-13 do you have a surplus? So part of it is an explanation. Part of it is trying to budget as accurately as you can. So we're going to do both. I understand what you're saying. My concern is, again, and I've always, my philosophy is it's better to have little tax increases than to have big tax increases. And so sometimes it's better to go take little steps each year than it is to try to hold the line and then take one big step. And what I guess I'm trying to prevent is in 15-16 having that gigantic step that nobody could reach, where you have draconian cuts, large tax increases because there's no money left. Generally, Standard & Poor's, if you look at Standard & Poor's, Moody's, they recommend at least a minimum of 5% fund balance. You'll get better ratings if you have 8 to 10% fund balance. Currently, if you spend, say, you budgeted 2.2, if you spend about 1.7 million of that fund balance this year, you'll end up next year with a 5% fund balance. My recommendation would be, if you're at 5%, that's where you try to hold the line. You have a balanced budget between expenditures and revenues. But that's simply a financial recommendation. I mean, any business will tell you that you want to have at least 2 or 3 months of cash available for expenditures in case something happens.
I think I found too that, I mean, what happens a lot of times with municipal budgeting on our end or school district, the same thing is, because of the size of the numbers, it's hard for the person that, the average person making $50,000 a year to understand it. But if you look at our $700,000 surplus and you break that down, and what's our budget? $52 million approximately.
Yeah, it's less than 1%.
So
yeah.
Right. So if I try to explain it, plus if you make $52,000 a year and you hit your budget with $700 left, I mean, you went all year and you hit your budget with $700 left, you would probably be ecstatic. I mean, you wouldn't look at it as, wow, I totally blew my budget because I didn't budget properly. It's just because there's all those zeros on the end. I think
you're right. I think you're exactly right. I think but the issue though is that, as you know, I mean, the last few years, it's the last $100,000 or $500,000 that we as a board fight over for a month and a half. It's that last $500,000 is, this program or that tax raise, or it's like it's you know what I mean? Like those are the hardest decisions you're making. Is the last $500,000. As I imagine somebody with a $52,000 income was saying that $700 is that vacation or that credit card bill or that Christmas present or whatever is most important to them. That mortgage payment.
Or it could go into savings for when the
I hear you.
Next year or the transmission. I don't know. I mean I know because I get the same argument at my job. I don't know what the answer is, but.
Well, who in this room doesn't have some sort of savings account, or shouldn't have some sort of savings account? I'll put it that way. I mean, you want to have some sort of savings account for that emergency that comes up, and it's the same with school districts. I mean, you talk to anybody that rates school districts, and they'll tell you the same thing. Yeah,
the funny thing, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I would agree with that in principle, but when you actually take a look at our audits and things of that nature, I mean, we had $105 million for the debt. We were over-leveraged out the wazoo, and we had, even said that in 1 or 2 of our audits, that we had more debt than we should have. Yet Moody's kept coming back with whatever it was, a AAA, plus rating for us year after year after year, and RBC Capital was showing up at our door saying, if you guys wanted to do another bond issue, you're still rated at, AAA, and I'm thinking, how can that even be possible? But, these rating agencies, I mean, they're not necessarily always doing their job in the sense that they're looking at the credit worthiness and your ability to pay and those sort of things. I mean, they sit there and say, well, yeah, you're a taxing authority. You can just raise taxes and take care of it. Well, you're limited to $780,000 in terms of being able to raise your taxes from one year to the next, and that number's been going down for the last 2 or 3 years. So it's not like we can turn around and just raise, $2 million at the drop of a hat to cover a bond issue.
Well, let me try to. One of the things that we were doing when Kim came on board, I said I think there's certain statistics that the board really has not had a good review of over the years for whatever reason. Either the person didn't have the sophistication to put these together, but I was astounded by the enrollment figures that he showed me and looking at the implications of those. And I was thinking, and again, not to be critical of anyone, but if we had used those kind of numbers in the past, maybe some better decisions would have been made going forward. So my first comment is, first, Kim, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been valuable information for the board, and given that you may be here a little while based on your schedule and availability, you may be helping the board through this process this spring. The second thing is I would recommend that we get this out to the entire board, and
I think you can send you can certainly send this information. Look, the way I look at it, anytime we have a conversation, the finance committee, and I don't know how other committees run there, but once we've done discussing it here, we've shared this with the public. The board should certainly have these spreadsheets
Absolutely.
and these PowerPoints as a whole. I mean, so I don't think we should ever hold any of this information back. So I guess the standing recommendation for me is after every finance committee meeting, just send the rest of the board, the documents that we discussed so that they have an opportunity to review them and ask questions. I think the other thing I would recommend is expanding on that PowerPoint. And we're probably going to be including almost all those slides as part of the budget presentation in November. And
well, let me get to that point. Then that was going to be, you're stealing my thunder. That was my third point. We are actively working with. We're on a very fast track to get those individual meetings, which have been very productive. We've met with technology. We've met with special education. We just met with extracurriculars today, sports specifically. We met with facilities. We have each principal coming before us before we go live on the 13th, and Mrs. Torsch will be sitting down, quote, defending her budget as well. And we will present to you a comprehensive plan the same way we presented last year that have our recommendations for all the levers that we talked about last year and a balanced budget.
let me just ask the question. I mean, how are these conversations going? I mean, are people coming to the table and saying, look, I think I found a place where we can save some money, or are they coming to the table like, this is what I got to have, don't take anything from me?
I'll let the two of them characterize it.
No, it's been very positive so far. I mean, the first department head we met with was Ken Smith, and we had about 2-hour discussion.
Yeah, we had him in there for 2 hours.
We wanted to go through his budget line by line, and what we presented him was his 11-12 actual, his 12-13 actual, his 13-14 budget, and what he recommended initially for his 14-15 budget. We laid it all out and went through line by line. We started, your spending pattern was this, your budget for 13-14 was this, doesn't quite add up.
I think he was doing a lot of deferred maintenance, but
Well,
is that what came up in that conversation?
I guess some. I mean, he really didn't mention deferred maintenance at all, but he did mention that whole needs, we walked through each line, and he went through in great detail of what he thought he needed and what he thought he could cut back.
Yeah.
And he did cut things back.
We looked at, it was reality time, and like with special ed, we said, well, this number's not adding up. You have, I'm just going to throw a number out. You have 50 grand in here, but the last 2 years there was $10,000 expended. We need an answer on that. And we're making adjustments based on those conversations as we speak. They've got more assignments to go back and look at those numbers. And where they're justified and we have definite costs, you're going to get a real number. We said we would take anything that was, considered to be contingency or out of line with what the actuals were, and then we will make a final determination as to make a recommendation to the board for what should be a contingency for all departments across the district, rather than having people have fluff.
Are you going to make that based on historical transfers, or what are you looking at for that data
Right now
to come
for
up
the
with that?
contingency, historically, there's always been $50,000 budgeted in a single line, basically called contingency. In the past 2 years, at least 3 years, I believe, $50,000 has been in the budget for contingency, which has never been spent.
Yeah, because we end up doing all these inter-account transfers all
It
the
was
time.
mostly CSI, if the special ed placement ran over, or if, but yes, the first line of defense is to do inter-department transfers, essentially. If you have money someplace that you can cover it, people have done that, which kind of can tell you a couple things. One, it can tell you they're over budgeting some lines, or two, they're not spending because they spent the money already because they had this expenditure they didn't expect. So they moved the money and they didn't buy whatever they had planned to buy. So that's what a budget transfer kind of tells you. Now the contingency that has been set up, I'm not sure how the 50,000 came about. It was just a round number, yeah. Pulled out. What we plan to do is, and specifically with Ken, because you never know what the weather's going to bring or what mechanical item is going to break and you need to
right.
purchase. What he cut, we decided to take some of that money, what he cut out of his budget, and put it in contingency for him. And the remainder is, quote, savings, or just budget reduction. So, and we talked with Kenny about that. We made it clear what our intent was and what contingency funds are for in this line. If you need the money, we'll transfer that money out and if it's needed. And he was accepting of that.
Now, we're getting ready to do, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but, you know, like Monday night, we're getting ready to approve replacing these windows in the high school, and, you know, is that a necessary, because that's coming out of,
Capital.
well, yeah, it's a capital expense, but we don't have capital funds.
I thought it was coming out of the capital reserve account.
Yeah. How much, do we actually have money sitting in a capital reserve account, or do we just sort of sit there and say we got $4.4 million in fund balance and we're going to say this is a capital
this is
expense?
actually a separate fund.
How much money is in that fund?
I believe right now it's at $429,000, I believe.
I see, okay.
That's Ken's, that's his,
Yeah.
No, I thought it was coming from energy.
well, that's, but
Well,
the
it
board
is.
determined that any time Ken made money, not Ken, that the district made money,
It went into that account.
It went in. It's an
That's how we were
automatic-
funding our capital reserves,
Yeah.
was we said that anytime we get a demand response check or something else, that money would go, because we weren't budgeting for our capital reserves. So we just said whatever revenues we can generate would automatically go into that capital reserve account for Ken's use. All right, that answers that question. Okay.
Is there a recommended, like, percent of contingency on budget as a whole? Like, say, every line item was what you specifically felt was needed, and nobody has built it. Can you then look at the overall budget and then say, we should have a 5% contingency somewhere? Or do they not really do it that way?
Well, that's what we do. We didn't allow anybody in our district to have a contingency fund. We had one contingency, and if an expense came up that they weren't expecting, like a copier broke down, I mean, that's what principals are afraid of, the copier breaking down. So they would put a contingency in there, okay, I need maybe $2,000 in there in case it breaks down and I need to repair it. And we took those out. And what we put in, we had a similar sized budget. It was a little bit bigger than Danny Boone's, but we put in $150,000 as a contingency fund. So I think anywhere, you know, my recommendation, you can take out all the contingencies and just have an emergency fund for, oh, this broke down, this broke, I didn't expect it, or this happened. You know, you probably want more like $100,000 in there. Now, you do have a capital reserve fund, which is a separate set of, you know, books, or basically a separate set of balancing accounts that normally school districts will transfer amount in there to cover, you know, roof repairs, window replacements,
pump
door
breaks down.
replacements.
Yeah, we got all those
Those types of
heat
things.
pumps in the MEC that are.
So really, it's not even really a 1%.
Right.
It's like, okay.
So we're grappling with that. I can tell you now, you're not going to know what they are yet, but we're going to be coming with some staff reductions. There's no way to do it without staff
You
reductions.
can't get from
Can't
here to
get
there
can't get from here to there without it. Our enrollment's going down. It's going to be justifiable, and there are going to be some difficult conversations again. And we're going to put them on the table, and they need to be looked at. But you will have all that in a nice little package by the next finance committee meeting.
Okay.
There's really not. I mean, the process is just a lot of work. It's going very
No.
smoothly.
Look, I'm glad to hear it. Before we get too far down on our agenda here, Shane, did you have any questions about what you've seen to date, or the conversation we're having with the budget?
Yeah, I have a few comments. I think with the population of building, the projection of building in Birdsboro and Union Township and Amity, I'm almost 100% sure that Birdsboro is completely developed. There's There's not going to be any more homes being built in Birdsboro. Union Township, you have Village Green. That is being in the process of being purchased.
Yeah, Union Green.
They just started, I guess, blacktopping the roads and stuff like that. Is that 160 homes going in
So
there?
I think that's about right, yeah.
160 homes. You also, in Union Township, you'll have the 55 and older community going in, which is around 200. 60 of them are being changed to townhouses.
Right.
But other than that, I mean, there's the one David Heiser development on Center Road, which is 11 homes,
Yeah.
but that's not going to get built anytime.
Well, I think the issue, though, is with Union Green and even with the other one that, what's the name of that developer?
I forgot.
WB Homes.
WB Homes. That's what I was called.
You know, like with any development, they're probably, I don't know, probably another 6 months or a year for getting their final approvals.
Oh, at least, yeah.
Yeah, and then you're looking at, you know, another year to put the improvements in and start building, and then, you know, a 200 unit subdivision is going to take them, especially in this economy. My gosh, it could take 10 years to build out. But let's say the economy starts to improve, you're looking at 5, 3 if it's booming.
Right.
So you're still 5 years away from adding.
My point is, there's not going to be too many children moving in there since it's designated for the 55 and older and townhouses. They have lists.
And Amity's pretty much put a moratorium on new construction.
And
They don't have the capacity in their sewage treatment plants anymore to. There's no more EDUs available. So
They have developments that are approved that can still build. correct?
yeah, but I don't know if the EDUs have been set aside for that.
I don't know, I know there's a lot of lots for sale in some of
Yeah.
those developments, so I would assume if they're for sale, I would,
Maybe.
you know, I don't know, like Woods
Maybe
Edge.
they've already. Yeah, well, Woods Edge, they probably do have the EDUs set aside.
And again, I mean, I think they're giving you historical data, that's good data, I don't.
I would trust these numbers.
Right, I would trust.
These
Well,
numbers.
Chaz has got a pretty good handle on what's
Right.
coming up in
So I mean,
Amity Township.
if they're giving you numbers, I wouldn't doubt them.
No, my point is, if you would focus more on what's Amity's doing, because I think Union Township is going to be pretty much done. Birdsboro is pretty much done. So any kind of future development will be over in Amity.
And it's not even on the books yet, really.
Yeah, so that was one.
No, I don't think they're going off, Amity's giving him numbers based off approved developments that have existing lots.
But what I mean is that the growth is flat.
I think Chaz would have also given them the numbers based on what he saw coming through the door. If there were some preliminary plans that are being discussed or whatever else.
Right, but they gave you numbers for next year, correct? So they're not, I mean, I think there's, I don't know.
I'm not
sure.
questioning his numbers or anything. I'm just saying, Birdsville, you're not going to have any more
They
development.
don't have any.
Union Township, the only one is going to be the
WB Homes.
well, not WB, the Village Green,
Union Green.
Union Green.
But that's already on the books in terms of it's subdivided, ready to go. And
Right. So, although there's probably 150 homes that will be built. The other thing is, well, the only reason people get mad when there's a surplus is because of, like Andrew said, the cut. It'd be different if you didn't cut anything and there was no tax increase, but you had that cut in the elementary programming. If you didn't have the cut and you pulled a $700,000 surplus, you
Right,
wouldn't
but we
have
don't
any-
know we're gonna have a surplus.
No, I know.
So we have
I'm saying
to-
that's why you get the
I understand
the
that.
backlash. It's not because, oh my gosh, we pulled a surplus. It's those hard cuts that you have to make at, you know, a week before your budget has to be passed and make these cuts. And it's detrimental to the education, and then 2 months later you find out that there's a surplus.
Yeah, and I understand, I'm just saying, I think sometimes people need to look at it a little bit more like, just like they do their household. Because you do the same thing in your house. If you didn't get a raise and your insurance goes up, and you make decisions based on
What you know at the
what you
time.
know at the time. And sometimes you make hard decisions that affect your family. we're no different. It's just on a huge, it's on a larger scale, and we are affecting other people's kids, and we know that. I mean, they affect our kids too. And I think sometimes, it's very easy to sit out there and criticize. People aren't really lining up to sit up here to do it.
Right.
So I think if I understand people get upset, but you're doing the best you can with the numbers you have. And if they looked at it a little bit more, I think, instead of like big government versus us, we're doing the same things that you guys do in your house every year.
Right.
And sometimes we're going to hit better numbers, and sometimes we're not.
Well, I think the important takeaway here, though, Shane, is that the driver here is that tax increases aren't going to solve the problem at $780,000 a year when you have salaries and benefits moving at $2.5 million a year. You can raise the taxes as high as you want every single year. You're still going to fall behind. The issue is you got to tackle that part of our budget that is growing the fastest, and that comes in programming because that's where the bodies are, right? That's where the teachers are. The teachers aren't willing to negotiate on their contract, so you're left with no alternative than to cut the program. And instead of blaming the board, the attention should be focused on the teachers who are walking away with the pay raises. I mean, that's where the money's going. It's not coming to us.
Right, but that's if you want to pull the surplus, it was a justifiable cut. And that's the only reason.
Yeah, but when we made the decision, it was we were making a deficit decision, right? We decided we were gonna spend $1.3 million
from our savings account.
Right.
in order to save as much program as we could and to give the taxpayers a break, right?
And I'll be honest,
So-
I think extracurricular and encores and all that is great, but if the kids aren't learning to read, write, and do
The curriculum.
the curriculum, I'll cut gym, music, and art any day, because I think they need to learn how to read, write, and do that stuff before learning music. And all. I understand a well-rounded education includes all that, but I still think if you don't have the fundamentals, nothing else really matters. So,
The other
Okay.
thing, I think, with your projection, you use the master's plus 20 to look at everyone's, compare the salaries. If I'm not mistaken, it's year 15, the teachers get a huge jump in salary. It's like a $10,000-$12,000.
Most
jump.
contracts have a jump step built in. That's
Right.
the union does that.
I think Twin Valleys is 12, Exeter's, I think, is 10. But it goes like this, and then when the teachers prove that they're in there for the long haul, for some reason, it jumps. So it'd be nice to see what, you took Masters plus 20, how many teachers are in the Masters plus 20?
Well, it was 20 years of service. There's only 16 steps, Mark, in the schedule.
Yes.
There's only 16 steps. So if you're a teacher that started 16 years ago, you're already at step 16.
Right.
So if you're here 20 years, you're still at step 16. If you're here 35 years, you're still at step 16. So why I used 20 was that's sort of like almost the halfway point between 1 and 35. That's what the IU has. They have 15 and 20. But my point is that most teachers are going to be in your population, and we can come back with more specific data. But even at 15 years, Daniel Boone, had the highest salary.
That's
So-
their jump.
Well,
That's year 15
and understand if you ever look at our salary matrix, and we published it, right, what every teacher was making and all that kind of stuff, but if you actually look at it on a percentage basis, new teachers are making, in the lower end, they're making, the step plus the movement is 5 to 6%, right? You get to the upper end, and teachers are making, 15% jumps from one year to the next. I mean, it's
It's
completely...
an average 6%.
It's an average 6% overall, but like 6 or 7. But when you're in the upper echelon, I mean, the steps are ginormous. Not only the steps, but the movement too, right? You have the both put in there, and so I mean, we had teachers that were getting
5-figure raises last year.
Yeah, 5-figure raises last year.
I understand. I don't understand. why
$15,000
Your
increases.
contract.
That's what
for
they
all
negotiated.
teachers across the board, contract fluctuates like that. It should be a steady.
It should be, but across the Commonwealth, that's the way, as an organization, that's what PSEA is really pushing. They want teachers to get to the top step as quickly as possible.
Right.
And there's obviously financial benefits to a person to be able to get to the top step as quickly as possible.
When we
You
did
get the top step as quickly as possible. You get vested in the pension fund with a longer, there's an incentive here. It's a long-term game plan, right? If you can get into the upper echelon sooner, faster, then your pension is that much bigger when you retire, right? And quite frankly, if you can get into the upper echelon sooner, faster, you're making a good amount of money. And those, if there are cutbacks, it's those that are at the lower echelon that are the one that are getting let go. It doesn't impact a district's budget hardly at all to let go of somebody who's making $40,000 a year.
The contract,
Right? I mean,
not to cut you off, but we did an analysis that we didn't put on paper that included looking at the whole state. And if you factor out the southeast corridor of our state, which is where most of your highest real estate wealth is, Daniel Boone's probably in the top 10 in the state with its contract. Once you get outside of the,
Right.
if you take out the Council Rocks of the world and the Ben Salems and the Neshamites and those, quote, wealthier school districts down on the main line, Daniel Boone's pretty high.
No, I understand it, but my only point was maybe to see what, instead of masters plus 20,
I think you could pick any bracket.
Doesn't matter. They're all high.
With our contract, I think you could pick any bracket.
They're all
and you'd
high.
find we're probably at the top.
And the other thing is with our health insurance that we pay, there's a lot of teachers that are married to teachers, and you're paying insurance for both of them. So if you're a teacher in Daniel Boone and you're married to a teacher in Exeter,
We have an opt-out program, so we'll pay a small portion for that teacher not to take the insurance. Because it's basically the same insurance, so we're in consortium. So that teacher's working in Exeter and their spouse is working here. Personally, my wife works for Muhlenberg School District. I opt out of the insurance here. There's no double coverage. There's really no double coverage. So they opt out. We pay I get $3,067 to opt out of the insurance, which would cost me for a family about $16,000. So there's a savings to the district when we push people off the plan.
off the plan.
Yeah. So we're incentivizing people not to take the insurance.
But there's a lot of people that will still take the insurance because the opt-out isn't enough of a benefit for them to.
Well, if you have
Depends on their health care
insurance,
needs.
It depends what they are. If they're married to a spouse that's also a teacher, especially if they're teaching in the Daniel Boone School District, they're both teaching. One's going to opt out, so we're not double coveraging that many people. Now there are other options that we could take that could help incentivize that even more, but that's completely up for discussion.
And that was pretty much all I had.
Well, let me ask that question, though. I mean, why are we paying people to opt out?
Why not?
Well,
Because if you don't pay them, they'll take it.
Yeah,
Take
they'll
it.
just-
This is an argument I'm going through in negotiations
You
right
can't
now.
you can't force them
They'll
out.
take it to cost you $16,000 because you won't
They have a
give
right
them
to take
anything
it.
for not taking it.
I mean,
Even though they don't need
this does make sense for us to.
but aren't their deductibles and everything else higher if they're on a single
They're not
plan?
using it. They're not even using it. They just take it to cost you money. It's a
I really don't. I mean, they have to.
It's a sweat
They would have to
thing, yeah.
sign off on it, and you cannot, as an employer, as a full-time employee, I don't think we cannot provide health care insurance to someone. They have to prove that they have. When they sign off on the waiver, they have to prove that they're covered in some way, shape, or form. So, to get them off the plan, they're covered by their spouse. It's $3,000 well spent, rather than 16 or 6 or.
So it's a net of 13
Yeah.
to the district's good.
I mean, right now we're calculating.
You guys pay something for your insurance, right?
Well, there's a copay too.
Yeah.
But I mean, like you pay a
Family
you pay
Yeah.
a weekly
12%.
deduction, so then maybe they wouldn't if they're not.
An estimated
But-
family plan is $18,578 for next year. That's what we're estimating. That's it.
Well, what's the copay on that? If it's 10 or 12%, you're looking at what, $2,200 or something like that?
It's $2,043.
Like, so I think that's what we ought to be paying them.
What? Do you still provide insurance? Are you
Right.
will you
Because that's
provide
what's coming out of pocket to be on our plan, so that's supposed
Out of
to,
their pocket, not about our pocket, our pockets.
I know, but if
I
you
know
said,
see
look,
what you're saying, but I was
it's gonna cost you $2,000 to be on our plan, we'll give you $2,000, go somewhere else.
take that approach.
Do we know?
That's not in a contract or anything, right?
It is.
It is in our contract. The opt-out is in our contract.
Yes.
Okay.
Do,
I trust you. You don't have to show it. You don't have to read it to
No,
me.
I actually,
do
it's
professional
surprising I just
staff that
found
aren't
that
full-time
tonight.
get insurance
Okay.
as
Because I was
well?
looking for the,
Professional
Just,
staff that aren't
double check
full-time
myself.
in this district, yes.
That's where I would go. That's what I would go
Well,
after.
these are all your notes for
Say that?
negotiations.
Part-time teachers
Should get part-time
full
benefits.
insurance.
Yeah,
Get
that's
full-
ridiculous.
but
Daniel
that's-
Boone's very
but that's
unique in that
something I would-
regard.
Like, I would definitely go after that.
Pardon?
All teachers get benefits.
Yep.
yeah, it's actually.
That's
on-
very unique.
ridiculous.
Daniel Boone's very unique
It's on
that way.
page
This is what our board did when they signed that contract.
I can only tell you, I wasn't here to advise anybody when that
No, I
happened.
know,
Yeah.
but I noticed that like
So-
years ago when I read
Even I would have said, no, I'm not so sure
We're
about
kind
that
of
one.
wandering off topic here, but this is one of the things I wanted to ask you tonight, Mark, which was, you're the designated representative to the health consortium by the school district. Have you been to a meeting yet?
Actually missed the first meeting. Joe Boyle did go. He's our union representative.
Yeah, but he doesn't represent the board,
No.
right? So he represents the DBEA.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, the way that's constructed, each of the unions is allowed to have their own rep on
They
there.
have two from each school.
That's not something we determined.
no, and I agree with you, but someone is going to represent the school boards.
Correct.
And typically it's the business manager, or do other school districts have
There's,
school board members?
The one meeting I did fill in for Danielle, and typically it's either the business manager, assistant business manager. There's a couple superintendents there, an HR director.
But no board members.
When
Yeah, I think we
talked
did-
to-
I think
when
we
talked
did
to Dr.
answer.
Egan, he said a board member could be on it.
Good, well, yes, yeah, because we're the ones paying it.
Well, that'd be the union representative then.
Huh?
That'd be your school district. You get two representatives.
Right, you have a
Yeah.
union representative and you have a district representative. Right. I'm just curious, because it seems to me, and no offense to employees of the school district, you have nothing but employees of the school district making decisions about their own health care. Right? You have business managers, superintendents, and union leadership deciding what kind of health care coverage we're going to be providing the business managers, the superintendents, and the teachers.
I see where you're going with this, but I mean,
It's the foxes watching the hen house.
But it is a. I mean, you have district representation.
I'm not saying that you're not
No.
representing our best interests. I'm just saying, though, that from
I know
a principal point of view,
I get completely what you're saying, but I mean, you do have. Well,
I just wondered to what degree are the. I'm not saying it's you guys. I'm just saying how hard are the superintendents and the business managers and the other school districts advocating on behalf of the taxpayers on what kind of health care plan that we're going to be
I
offering.
think they would be working really hard for that because that's what I'm doing right now.
I know you are.
Yeah.
You're the exception to the rule. Let's just say that.
I know what you're getting, but I mean, I understand. I mean, if I think
Every other organization that we have, right? Berks EIT, BCTC, whatever it is, it's board members who sit on those boards to make decisions about the how we're going to collect our taxes, what those employees are going to make, what those teachers are going to make, and so on and so forth. And because we have a fiduciary responsibility to represent the taxpayers who are footing the bill. But for whatever reason, when it came to the health consortium, it just sort of dawned on me the other night when I was thinking about this, is that it seems like all the school boards abdicate that responsibility to the business managers, probably because it's just easier, right? as opposed to saying, well, wait a minute, we should have board members on there. The same board members who are negotiating our contracts also ought to be negotiating the health benefits for those contracts. Because if you're looking at our contract, our hands are tied to offering a health care plan that is either what the consortium offers or the equivalent of what the consortium offers.
You can always opt out of the consortium.
But even if we opt out of the consortium, we still have to offer a health plan that provides the same level of health care that the consortium offers.
During the contract.
Because of the contract, but once the contract's
like,
up, then
right.
you're free basically to do whatever you want. I mean, the consortium is self-funded. You're going to save money being self-funded versus us going out to a provider and purchasing insurance.
I guess my point is that consortium, if you have 2 representatives from every single school district, and let's say one of those people is, let's say it's board members or it's business managers advocating on behalf of those school districts, those, I would say, in this particular climate, that in a lot of other school districts have been renegotiating their contracts and getting 0% increases and so on and so forth from their teachers. But one thing I think is sort of slipping under the radar here is what kind of health care benefits are we offering as part of that? Because we have a $3 million liability in health care and benefits as part of our overall.
It's about that.
Yeah. So that seems like a lot of money. If you could go in and say, well, look, we're going to increase deductibles, right? Or we're going to get rid of dental plans or vision plans or whatever it is. If the consortium decides to do that, that reduces individual school districts' costs then, right? Considerably.
Can I ask you a question on the consortium?
But we can't get them to do that because
it has the same insurance, right? The consortium.
Yes. Well,
But they don't have the same plan.
All the same. No, it's all the same medical plan. So anyone's in the
They all have
consortium
the same
is the same
copays.
medical
They all have
plan.
the same.
Yeah.
Okay, because see, like if I'm in a consortium
Well,
where each individual union or municipality can negotiate their own benefits. It's just a consortium.
It's the plan that's the same. I cannot speak on behalf of if a district charges a different copay percentage.
No. I mean,
Yeah.
like if
So-
I go to the if
Yep.
Dana Boone goes to the doctor and it's $15, is Exeter $15?
Yes.
Or, so Exeter can't say ours is $15.
That copay, the copay the employee pays as part of having the health insurance, I can't guarantee how it's written.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
that's what. No,
But
that's
but
what
like
I was trying to find out.
if what I'm thinking, right? If you go to the doctor and your medical card says $15 copay,
Right.
you get.
Okay.
I mean, that's
Okay.
yeah.
See, for me, like if I go to the doctor and it's 20, Pottstown Borough can have be in the same consortium and they can have a $10 copay, and Lower Merion can
Yeah,
have a
it's,
$5. We just tailor our own plans within the consortium. So I see what you're saying because, like, I'm a rep for my consortium because they're just voting on who they're letting in, what they're doing with the money, those kinds of things. Each individual place is negotiating the actual benefits,
Mhm.
and then the consortium contracts with Aetna that they self-fund to do the administration, but they self-fund it. So I do see.
I'm just telling you, as an employer, I
Right.
run my own business,
Right.
and I look at what the cost of health care is, for my employees, and every year it's a struggle to provide that health care, right? Because the costs are going up exponentially. So you're constantly sitting down and saying, okay, well, what if I change the deductible? We increase deductibles, or we have a cap. You can only pay so many deductibles. Instead of being $2,500, it's $5,000 or something like that. So essentially, what you're doing is you're shifting those expenses onto your employee, but in the same time, you're saving the ability to provide health care to your employee overall, right? So you're reducing your overall cost by increasing your premiums, so to speak, or not only your premiums but your deductibles. So you're constantly we spend more time on this every year than I care to talk about. But I don't understand what's happening at the consortium level where you have all these districts. I mean, it would seem to me the unions would be sitting there folding their arms and saying, well, we want the lowest possible deductible ever, if any, and we want as much coverage as possible because it's not coming out of their pocket, really. 90% of that's being subsidized by the school district.
I'm not sure exactly on how the workings are of the meeting. I've
Yeah.
only been to one.
Yeah.
So it seemed as though that there's the board appointed person.
Right.
So right now you have me as a board appointed person. I think they have the voting rights versus the union.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not quite sure on that. I have to get more information on it.
I'd like you to find out I'd like to know how this consortium works. Who votes, who doesn't, who's going to this thing, because I think at the end of the day, collectively, I know from serving on the Berks EIT, you had 18 school board members there, and we would sit and talk in depth about what the plan was going to be going forward, what's collectively in the best interest of all the districts and individually for the individual school districts, and we come up with a plan to go forward. I would hope that same conversation is taking place at a consortium level where those representatives of the school districts are sitting down and saying, okay, well, if we did this, what's the impact to all of our respective budgets? Does it go down? We all want to provide health care to our employees, but, a small little change in somebody's, copay could have a significant impact to a school district. And so, increasing somebody's copay from 25 to 50, it's $25, right? For a school district, that may mean a drop in your overall, health care exposure of, I don't know, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
10%, 10, 15%.
You know what I mean? Like, that's significant. And I don't know if anybody's there lobbying for that kind of stuff. It just seems to me we just sort of sit back passively and take whatever the consortium is giving us from one year to the next. Yeah, I know. You've been to one meeting.
I can't honestly give you complete 100% feedback.
Yeah. When does the consortium meet?
4 times a year.
Only 4 times a year. And is it? Obviously it's quarterly.
Yeah.
So
October. I missed the October meeting.
So the next meeting's in January.
I believe so. I can get you the date if you would like.
Yeah, I think I'd like to know when the consortium meets. Where does it meet?
Fleetwood Area School District.
Okay.
And that's primarily, I think, because the superintendent of Fleetwood is...
He runs it.
He is the elected...
Well, I'd like to talk to the board. I'd like to start getting in... Let's get a list of the people in the consortium, who's representing them. How does the voting work? Do they have an agenda for next year, and what is it? What's their goal? What types of things are they looking at? And I'd like to start reaching out. Maybe our Berks EIT rep can start reaching out to those members in those other school districts, just start having that conversation with them about what is it they're doing here, and how is Obamacare and everything else impacting our health care plan.
That's something that we need to sit down after we get the budget settled and start working on it. Have basically all the information of what we need to do to calculate that out. It's going to be some big decisions we need to make.
At the consortium level?
No, at our district level.
Well, I would also think at the consortium level too, right?
It's more the district level. It's about how we have our employees. Basically, anyone working more than 30 hours a week, according to Obamacare, should be offered insurance.
So our part-time employees should be offered insurance. And our contract says you have to offer them...
And it's just not for a full year. It goes... It's like segmented. So let's say during football season, our head football coach is working more than 30 hours a week. Do we have to offer him health care insurance? Yes.
Oh, Obamacare says yes?
Yeah. But wait, we can have a separate plan for those individuals that we have to offer health care insurance to that work 30 hours a week. And there's no regulation on how high that copay can be. So the copay could be the entire insurance. As long as we're offering them the insurance that we are offering them, we should typically be okay. But it's whether or not we want, but they can take the insurance though too. So if we make it astronomical and we say, well, yeah, I really want to be on the insurance for 3 months, then they can be on the insurance.
But they're paying 100% 100% of the cost.
However we deem it. So there is decisions that need to be made on the consortium level. There's also a lot of decisions we need to make as a district.
But I'm just saying that, it's that ripple effect, right? So at the micro level here, as a district, now you're being forced to offer this, or health care in general, across a broader spectrum of your employees, which is going to increase your costs overall. And then, so as a result, that now needs to be taken up to the consortium level, say, all right, our costs just spiked because of this. Now, how do we bring them back down again? What decisions are we going to make at a macro level that are going to reduce our overall cost back to something that we can afford?
I agree with you with that, but there's still some things that we can do on the district level that can help avoid some of that.
Now, I think the other thing we need to know at the consortium level is who are the key players that are making these decisions? Because it's certainly not 18. 18 people meeting 4 times a year can't possibly be doing the analysis that's taking place when it comes to healthcare decisions for the entire consortium. There's got to be 4 or 5 people who are driving the bus.
Legal representation there.
Yeah, okay, but they're just providing legal advice. But I'm
Is there an
saying,
executive committee maybe?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's got to be 3 or 4 people.
I have to get all
I
this
think it's the IU
information
business
for you.
manager is
I
heavily involved in it.
will have to get you the information.
The IU does a lot of coordination of it. I mean, I've never been the rep, but I know that Carl Blessing.
And I think whoever that is that's driving the bus, I'd like to have them come to one of our board meetings.
They would do that. I'm pretty sure they would do that.
Because there's just no way, A, that they're reporting out to you guys on a weekly or bi-weekly basis about what they're doing. And C, doing it on a quarterly basis, where you guys are going to show up for an hour or two on a Tuesday night or whatever it is, and they're going to be able to disseminate, somebody's making the decisions, and they're just looking
on Monday.
and they're just looking for people to rubber stamp whatever those decisions are going forward. So I'd like to know who's making the decisions. And then how do we get in touch with them with regularity as a school district to influence what those decisions are? You guys have any thoughts on that?
No, I think it has to be controlled. I
So
mean,
you're volunteering to spearhead the, is that what I've heard?
I am?
I don't know, I just thought I heard you volunteering.
No, I just
Maybe
know
we need a
We might need a-
healthcare committee.
ad hoc.
Because there could be.
I think you should find out how they
I'm
operate
curious
before you
what-
jump in head
That
first.
takes a
Questions.
week, though, to find out how to operate.
But my point is, you don't know that yet. I would at least get that minimal information before you make a
Do
decision.
we have copies of the bylaws and the declarations for the consortium?
I would have to check what
Yeah.
Danielle has, or had.
Or just call the consortium and ask them.
I'll make contact with Mr. Dr.
Call
Egan.
Carl Blessing tomorrow. He'll be able to give you everything. Either him
I-
or Paul Egan.
I'm not coming on you, I hope I'm not coming on you like a ton of bricks. It's just when something like this gets in my head, I'm just full of 100
I get it.
questions.
It's cool.
Okay, and they just all come out at once. So that's just the way it works with me.
No, I think they're all legitimate. I think we don't know what we don't know, though. So I think until you get a handle on what is real versus what are suppositions, and they can probably get that information in a couple days. Carl Blessing would know, Paul Egan would know, because they've talked about it at length at superintendent meetings, and frankly, there just hasn't been a lot of controversy around it, so there really hasn't been a lot of talk about it. So I think it's just they're all good questions. It's just a matter of getting the answers.
I just understand how bureaucracy works,
No,
and it's one of these things where a lot of people, just because it's easier, they allow other organizations or people make decisions for them, right? And then these other people are in a bubble without a whole lot of feedback, and they're making they're just deciding, well, we think this is what's best, and everybody else rides along with it, and there's an impact to us.
Well, there's and just the commentary that
I'm not saying they're doing a good job. Maybe they're doing the best job
and that's
that
what I
they can be
wanted to
done.
say. I think there has been, behind closed doors, a lot of concern on the part of some school districts, and some have left the consortium, some decided not to stay in it. So Daniel Boone's not into perpetuity, locked into staying in the consortium. I think at the time of the decision, which was made before I got here, to get into this consortium, was at that time to the district's financial benefit.
Oh,
to
we
do
saved.
so.
I think we saved like 10 or 12% or something like that. My recollection was.
I mean, my understanding of
jumping into
healthcare is it's
consortium.
either consortium or self-insure, and you do the
I don't know if the district could afford being self-insured.
We used to be.
That's my
It used
point.
to be self-insured.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. No, we
But
shopped. Yeah, we shopped it around.
Self-insured, you're paying every dollar that. So I go to the doctor and I have gallbladder surgery. District's paying
The
every dollar.
consortium's only like 5 years old.
Yeah.
No, what he's saying is,
I mean, to be
you are holding
self-funded.
your own bank account.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. I mean,
Self-funded
Yeah,
as
but
a
they were
district. I don't-
contracting the
We were-
creation of it out, so you're getting
Yeah.
your discounts and
Well,
everything.
yeah,
just
the
like, but yeah,
consortium
but
is
you're paying the
self-funded,
bill.
but for the district to go on their own to be self-funded, I mean, we could do it.
I think you-
No,
I mean, it is possible, but it's
I think the
It's quite
reason
entertaining.
that any district joins a consortium for healthcare is because at the end of the day, it's
it's
cheaper
an
than the
increase in
alternative.
buying power. Is what you're doing. Is you're trying to aggregate. You're aggregating your
Spread the cost among
employees so you
everybody.
can go into the marketplace and and get a deeper discount.
Plus you're spreading the cost about everything. Right now, if I go and have surgery, right?
Right. You're spreading it across the
spread
entire
across
pool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, whereas if we would have it in-house or just our own plan, there's, obviously ramifications for that. That our costs would be higher.
I don't
Doesn't-
think you're buying from the marketplace, though, are you? Because the consortium's self-funding.
Yeah, it's self-funding.
Right, so you're
using-
not really leveraging buying power, you're
using-
What were we
leveraging.
doing? We were like Blue Cross or something, Keystone Blue Cross or something.
Blue Cross is the provider.
Right, and we were with them outside of the consortium prior to that.
Were you
Then you were buying it
self-funding,
on the
or were you
marketplace,
buying
probably.
their plan of coverage?
We were probably buying their
Yeah,
plan of
because
coverage.
that's like so much higher. I mean, it is cheaper to be self-funded. It's a great thing if you can do it and make it work.
You're assuming all the risk.
You're assuming all the rest. You gotta carry the stopgap insurance, the stop loss insurance.
Our concern, we had reinsurance levels at a certain level. If a claim went over a certain level, you'd have reinsurance that would
It's
cover
stop
that
loss.
claim.
Yeah.
And then you'd have an aggregate cap to ensure that you would not go over a certain amount. Now, in our county, we did it district by district. Each district had their own individual pool.
Well, the biggest discussion that used to occur with the IU group when we would have these conversations at superintendent meetings was the negotiation of the rate. And some people weren't happy with the rate, so they left the consortium.
And that's, Lancaster County's no different. You have some districts that are in the consortium, some that self-insure on their own.
Some that buy plans on their own.
The benefits were still negotiated on the local level. It was just administrated through the consortium. I don't know how BCIU works,
I
or,
have to find out.
but those are questions that you can find out.
Yeah, my recollection, we were buying it because there was some broker that we were dealing with, and he would go out to the marketplace every year and come back with options for us.
Yeah, there's many ways you can do it. Right? Definitely.
Yeah,
being
while I've been here,
self-insured.
we've only been part of the
You're always
consortium.
going to save money self-insured
Yeah.
if you're big enough to do it, because the insurance company is not going to lose money. They're going to make money on you.
Okay, so sorry to take us a walk off the agenda here. Update on the salary matrix.
I should have that together by Friday.
You're just going to email that to us?
Yeah, I can email it to you. You're going to basically get the full salary complement by person. We'll have with the health insurance, pay the PSERS and the FICA. So it'll be up to date.
We have to have that to present the balanced budget anyway.
So I'll get it out to you.
Okay.
Take a look at it.
General financial information.
That was the
Okay.
We kind of inverted that.
No worries. Swap.
The swap, current swap as of 10/22 was $2,337,359.31. So we're still not quite at that
Yeah.
1,500 or 1.5 million. It did go down though.
Yeah, I saw that.
It did drop. So I will get this posted on the site tomorrow.
Okay. Real estate tax revenue.
We're still collecting. We're still on target. So we're doing pretty good with that. No, all the anomalies that we're telling you about been washed out, so we're good with Wells Fargo and everything else. We got it all straightened out. We're good to go.
So that's actually 13-14, right? Not 14-15.
Oh yeah, when I do that, yes. Sorry about that.
Typo.
Yeah, got a little excited.
Yeah, it's all right.
Wait till 14/15.
I hear you.
Tax revenue coming.
I think all of us can't wait till 14-15. Debt. Is that amortization schedule up on the website, or debt amortization schedule?
No, but I will get it up when I did get the swap up. The swap's up there. But I will get the debt put up with the swap tomorrow.
And, I mean, because that's set in stone. I mean, if you guys could put that in Excel, that people understand as what the amortization schedule is of each bond issue, and then sort of highlight what the total, maybe have a separate column. I think you do.
I can take a look how
On a separate column, what our total debt service payments are, and what the debt service payments are every year going forward till the end, and then sum them up, and then on the other side, what the balance, the outstanding balance is on the principal every year until it goes to zero.
I can work something.
You know what I mean? So that way, everybody can just look at the table. We don't have to keep mirroring it up at every single finance committee meeting, but people can look at the amortization schedule and say, oh, all
I
right.
figured I
Well,
only presented to you if we made a payment and it changed.
right.
I mean, right now we made 3 payments, so we're still kind of waiting.
Yeah, okay. Food service management company update.
Okay, I did contact the state about, it was brought up at a board meeting about pulling the high school out of the National School Lunch Program. I did make contact with the state. The person I made contact essentially pushed me off to another person that I'm waiting to hear back from. The big concern about doing that is with our contract with Sodexo. If the state thinks it's a material change to the contract, and if we make that change to pull out a National School Lunch Program, we would have to rebid the entire contract because the state would deem it a material change, and someone else might have wanted to bid on that contract that didn't get a chance to because it wasn't that way. So we're still investigating, trying to determine what we can and cannot do with that. Sodexo, in talking with Sodexo, they have school districts in New Jersey that their high schools do not participate in this National School Lunch Program, and there's some differences, but I'd say it works out pretty good with food sales. Our food sales still are not coming back. And
would pulling out of that program allow us to change the menu somewhat?
absolutely.
And so that we may see food sales go up? I mean, the only thing we're losing is the subsidy, right?
You're losing the subsidy. I did ask Sodexo about that, and the students there are basically free. They charge back to the food service fund. So if a student comes in, they don't have money, they know they're, I don't know if they still fill out the form or whatnot, I have to get the details on that, how it works. But they charge back the student to the food service fund.
So whatever revenues we're making off of those who are not free and reduced, we're subsidizing those that are.
So everyone
free and
still
reduced.
gets to eat.
Do we have an idea of how many or what, how much that is?
The subsidy
The
coming
free,
in?
yeah, for the free.
I can give you what we
Yeah,
got
we
last
should
year
know.
by the high school, so I can get
Yeah.
that information for you.
So that, yeah, I mean, if it's.
I mean,
Yeah, I think you already gave that
50%,
to
You don't
us.
want that, I mean, you might not
No.
want to do it if it's 10%
well,
or 5%.
it depends though. I mean, you never know what's going to happen because
Right.
you could say, well, the kids, the free and reduced, the only reason they're not buying the lunch is because the lunch stinks and they want
That's
something to
true,
eat. When everything changes and it's a la carte sales and they can get the 2 slices of pizza every day and French fries, you might start seeing more people.
But see, I wonder
that-
though, if they're free and reduced, can you still say, even if we don't participate, can you still say you have to buy the meal? You can't have 2 slices of pizza.
There wouldn't be a
and
meal
fries.
anymore.
There wouldn't be a meal,
No
period.
meal. It's all a la carte.
So just like going into a restaurant,
It's
you
like
order
going
from
to
the menu.
McDonald's and
You know,
ordering.
let me just take a look at this. Mark, am I correct in assuming that, like, I'm just looking at some of the statistics you gave us before, where breakfast free it was like 19,000 in 9/10, 2,400 reduced, total paid was 21,000. It's almost half and half. And I'm almost looking at these statistics as I go down, like 11/12, 25,000 free, 3,300 reduced, 20,000 paid.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's
So
five meals.
it's lopsided, right?
Yeah.
So theoretically, if we were just relying on,
You're ahead of the game.
I guess that's breakfast. So let me look at lunches. Lunches are different. So lunches, 55,000 free, 12,000 reduced. So that's 67,000. But paid is 148. So we almost have double the amount of lunch. We're selling twice as many as we're giving away.
Yeah.
So
And I guess where I was.
theoretically, I guess you could do it.
Well, and I guess where I was going with it is, I understand there wouldn't be a meal that's mandated. What we could say, could we mandate our own meal? This is a meal. A burger or a slice of pizza or whatever, a vegetable and a milk. And then you tell, I mean, if the kids are on free and reduced lunch, they get the meal,
You could.
not whatever you want.
There's you gotta kind of be careful because you don't want to segregate those children because some people will know they're on, even though we're not in the free and reduced,
True.
it doesn't really matter. I mean, trust me, I when I first heard about essentially pulling out of the National School Lunch Program, I mean, I've been a National School Lunch Program guy for a while, so I'm like, oh man, who would want to do that? But the more I'm discussing it, the more I'm thinking it through. it's actually, I believe, this is my personal account, it's not that bad of an idea to do that in our high school.
It's more people
In
will
the
buy.
elementary, different ball game. But the high school, I mean, it kind of opens up the doors what we can do, just not with our food, but with how the kitchen is run, period. So, the options, I'm not going to say the options are endless, but there's more options we can do if we would pull out, if it's possible for us to do it this year yet or beginning of next year to open that door.
Is there a timeline that you guys, I mean, when I say you guys, you, are thinking of in terms of, okay, well, look, this is sort of on the table here. Clearly, we got budget and everything else that's coming up, but, you know, would you have a recommendation for us by March where you could say, look, this is, we've been talking to Sodexo, we've been talking to other providers, and if we did go, this is what the model would look like based on historical numbers? And
the thing that we're waiting for right now is waiting for what the state has to say. I mean, I could put that work together and the state comes back and says, you have to open up your contract. I don't have time to open up the contract and go through it right now.
yeah,
But if they say, you know what, yeah, you guys are able to do that within your contract, and then the analysis would be to you. Because I think it's...
when do you think the state will give you a decision on that?
I'm hoping within soon, very, very soon. I mean,
Before-
the contact's there. I'm just waiting for the gentleman to come back to me with the...
With the answer?
Yeah. I was going to say verdict, but answer is good.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, just with talking with Kim Hayes and with Cindy Easton, yeah, I think that it's something that the board would really need to look at, and I personally think it's going towards a good idea to do that. But until I run the actual numbers and get back to you on
Yeah,
analysis
no,
of
you
that,
don't need to do that.
it might sway me differently. But right now, just with what I'm thinking, it's
I guess the first thing, well, let's just find out here what the state has to say, and then
Yeah.
even if the state says no, you'd have to renegotiate your or open your contract. Does our contract prohibit us from saying to Sodexo, you know what, we want to?
there's.
It's a 1-year contract or is it a 3-year
I think
contract?
it goes another year yet beyond this.
Okay, so we wouldn't be able to do anything until
Well,
at
we
least
could
another year.
always terminate and open it back up if we wanted to. And I have to look what the ramifications are of doing that.
Yeah,
I'd
there's got to
have,
be
I'd
some
have,
kind of
I'd have
penalty.
Brian look at that,
But yeah, I
just to get your legal background on that one.
Okay.
okay. So that's.
You guys have any other questions on that?
Not on that, no.
You have other questions?
I had one thing, and are you finished with
Yeah,
that
I
part of
think
it?
we're-
Okay, because this is other business. Something that I was thinking about, because I'm on the facilities and the finance, I had an idea, just popped in my head a while back. I didn't get a chance to talk to you about it.
It's okay.
But I was trying to find out, you know how when we approve all of these things that go on in our buildings, and some we make money on, some we don't. So I was thinking, is there any way we can do some type of an analysis on if we did shut down during certain times of the year and not allow people to use our facility only for certain periods, if there would be a savings anywhere, both on utilities, staffing, wear and tear, give the facilities department a little time to do some more of their maintenance that they say is so difficult to get done. And I was just looking at, like, if you just shut it down so that those people trying to use the facility, we just have to tell them during that time we're not letting anyone use the facility. And
I think
just
we
do
did
some
that
notes.
once, and so I think the short answer to your question is yes. I think there would be a significant savings, because my recollection was there was a time where the buildings were pretty much open 24/7, 365. Saturdays,
Right,
Sundays.
well, they're open every time I come around.
Yeah,
so-
and so, and I do know a couple of years ago we had said we got to be closing these things down. I forget what it was. Sundays, I think, was the only day that we shut the buildings completely down. Now, I don't know if that's changed since that decision.
I think I was on.
Yeah, it was like 3 years ago. We said, look, the building shouldn't be open 24/7. I mean, I don't know if you
Or
can
if
speak
they
to this,
are,
Dr. Otto. Did they
I-
open up again? Have people
Not that
started?
I'm
Has there
aware
been
of.
creep back into that area where?
Not that
Well,
I'm aware of.
we have that list of everybody who
But I
signs up to
think
use
you're
the
talking
facility.
like
You look
for weeks. or a month, or, rather than have.
Well, it's
them
open
use-
all the time, because I go through and I read.
Short answer is no, we haven't reversed that. I don't know if it's actually
When
happening.
you read the
If it
dates
is,
that
it's
everybody's using
happening
our building, it could be
kind of
Monday through Sunday.
serendipitously.
I mean, it's almost always open. And so I was just thinking if there were times that we could say, okay, for this week or this month, we are not allowing the public to use the facilities due to whatever analysis we come up with. We're going to save X amount of dollars in utilities. The facilities staff can do their work and they don't have to get overtime because we're using the
that's-
facilities forever.
And I think that's an excellent idea. I think that's a facilities conversation.
I think
but
it's both.
it is. There's going to be a financial
Right,
impact.
I'm on.
But I totally remember we had this conversation where we said the buildings were open Monday through Sunday, and it was like till 11 o'clock at night, and it was just everybody was using the buildings, and they were open all the time. And Ken was complaining about it. We were paying a ton of overtime, and he managed to get the overtime under control.
done.
And we had said we'll close down the buildings. There's no need to have a building open all day on a Sunday. People can go find some other place to do whatever recreation
Well,
that
we're
they're
not
going to
even
do.
making money with those.
That's what I'm saying. It's
Lobbies,
costing us
you don't
money
get
to have the
anything.
building open and have somebody go up there and close it down and have security or whatever, and somebody has to clean up afterwards. All those costs are on the school district. So we had said, no. I think we completely backed out all Sundays throughout the year. I think that's what
And
the
that's my
decision was that was
recollection, that
made.
it's
So you may want
that way.
to, you guys ought to put that on your list to talk about at the next facilities committee is with Ken. Let's go back and just research the decisions in the minutes.
Right.
Because the board
That's
did
what I
make a
was
decision on that. Now, beyond that, I think that we could sit there and say, well, look, between the days of, December 20th and January 2nd, maybe the building shouldn't be open at all. It's
Right,
the middle of
that's what I'm saying,
winter.
a complete shutdown, like
Right.
Well,
not.
just be careful. You have basketball tournaments over
Well,
the
I put on my notes here for school use only, like a basketball tournament, if it's a school use
Wrestling.
thing. But I'm talking about all these people who come in and use it.
Middle of vacation.
All these.
I think the elementaries are shut down anyway. I think we did have this conversation. I think some of those, we would have to analyze this before.
Well, I think we need to look at all these people we're allowing to use the building at no cost and how much the building is open and find out if we can take a few weeks out of the year and shut it down and get things done from facility standpoint and see if there's a savings on top of that on a financial standpoint. I just think it's.
I agree with you. I
looking
think it's a
into.
great idea.
So I thought I'd bring it up here, and I know I have talked to Ken, but I mean, I look at everything he is doing, and he's doing so many things with 4 people on the staff, and if he has to pay some of them overtime. Well, if we shut the building down, maybe we won't have to pay them overtime. They can get it done.
Well, plus we've already realized that there's a huge economic savings to the school district in
If we-
energy.
Energy, yeah.
I mean, we saved $33,000 in 2 months by going to a 4-day work week.
well,
And most of that was from energy savings,
9
right?
days.
9 days of powering down the buildings. So now take that across, the entire school year, multiply that by 4. It's $120,000 we just saved.
And I just thought there would be times that it could be equivalent to how many maybe I wrote here 3 months, but just to figure out when we could strategically shut the building down. Or building.
I think it's an excellent idea. I
But
don't
it's
think
just-
shutting a building down from use, like let's say over the Christmas holidays, or it's,
I mean, it could
spring
be
break or
implemented
something
next
else.
year when we're doing the budget to see if we have a savings on that, and then plan that savings into the budget somehow if we're going to shut it down.
yeah, it'd be a reduction in facilities costs.
Right.
And theoretically, I mean, I know the sports and stuff, they practice even, I think, when during Christmas, and but do they really have to? Would it really be detrimental to the sports program if the weight room was, I don't know, I mean.
They take a week off? I mean, that's what we're talking
Well, they
about.
would
That's what
probably
I
go to
mean.
the
But
community
I-
center.
right, but
Like,
what
they
I'm
could go to
thinking is,
Birdsboro Community
You're going
Center.
to probably get some.
Don't say
pushback.
that to a wrestling team when you got kids trying to make weight for January 2nd when they come back after the holiday and
I
they have to
know.
do it in their basement. That might be a problem.
I know,
Okay, then
but-
don't set a tournament for January 2nd.
No, 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 I'm
Set
not
it for
talking about-
January
I'm
7th.
not
So
talking
you
about-
got 5 days to
Well,
get them in
I'm saying
shape.
You have a year to plan it. It's not like it's going to
Well, that's
happen
what I'm saying.
this
I'm
year.
saying you will get some pushback from sports, But if the savings are there, I know, I
Would
agree
you rather
with but
lose
I'm
a
just
program,
saying.
or could
Right.
we find some savings somewhere? I mean,
I
I'm just
agree.
trying to balance out those issues.
I think it's a good conversation for facilities to start.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
Ken-
think facilities would like to know if there was a savings.
Well, Ken will be able to calculate that.
That's what I'm
If
saying.
he shuts it down.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
he could
he
tell
could
you
do
that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, he would know, we wouldn't know that.
You wouldn't need more than
Okay.
2 weeks. to
Mark
find
can't
out.
help you with that.
I could take the 33,000 and divide by the days and then shut down.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
that's what we just did.
No, Ken's got a good handle on that.
By the hour?
But Ken could tell you by building what you would save.
Yeah.
Okay.
He'd need a little time, but he could do it.
He's got all that software that he can tell
Yeah.
you by the kilowatt hour
Yeah.
how much money he's going to save by powering down a building to this and leaving it, it's, it's
Well, I didn't know
stabilized
if it
for
would be
2
easier
days.
for these guys to do it rather than just give it to,
I think Ken's the place to
just give it to
start.
Ken.
We're going to go to Ken. You make that
Okay.
an assignment for me. I'm in Ken's office tomorrow saying, Ken, I need
Well,
this.
then I would like to know.
But it's already on my
And he
list.
may come back with a recommendation. Well, these are the days that I would suggest.
Right.
Because he's going to look at historical energy usage and say, well, if you had a choice, I would suggest, it's the third week in January because that's typically when we get a spike in temperatures. And so close down that Saturday and Sunday because we may yield whatever it is. I mean, like he could get to that level of detail.
Right, because I mean, when I look at his list, he has a lot.
Oh, yeah, the guy does.
Dr. Otto, when you went to 4-day work week, was that there was no one in the building on Fridays? Like no maintenance, no janitorial, no,
That's correct.
okay. So you probably couldn't do
Zip.
that then for like a week at a time, like
I'm just saying, not allowing outside
Outsiders,
activity to
okay.
come into the building, not pay anything, and keep our staff running. Everything running
Right,
just for
okay.
that one little, that one.
I think the biggest savings out of that 33 grand or whatever was energy. So,
But I'm just saying, if your staff's still in there, you're still gonna have it.
yeah, but you
No,
could
but I
power
think
down
when
a
you-
building
what I would
on a
s-
Saturday afternoon, you know what I mean, to whatever the level is, and then you're going to start bringing it up again Sunday night, as opposed to powering it down on a Sunday night, you know what I mean, for a Monday morning. So you get that of 18 hours of.
The way I would analyze it would be, and Kim, maybe you've had some experience in CV, would be to create a blackout calendar. These are days
Right.
nothing's happening, period. And you go from January 1 to December 31st, you count up how many it's the same concept as the 4-day work week. You just you put black dots on a calendar and say, nothing will happen in any of these buildings on these days. Get Ken to compute a cost and then see if it happens. I mean, I don't know what you would think.
Well, we did the same as you. We did the 4-day work week, saved some amount of money. I know with our schedule, athletics was so full
Yeah.
that there wasn't any time. So unless you do both community groups and athletics, where you shut the entire building down, it's not going to benefit you at all. But if you can find as you said, these are days we're not going to schedule either any school activities or any community activities, and you can shut it down for 3 or 4 days, that'd be great.
I mean, if you can yield $20,000 or $30,000, I mean
Right.
that's.
I just think the more you plan it and you have a calendar of when that's going to
I agree with you.
Because
No, I
when
agree.
we did the 4-day work week, that was strategically planned. We knew exactly what days we were shutting down.
Right.
And we went ahead and we shut down. So if we're going to say from January, or let's since we all work fiscal year, from July 1 to June 30, we want to develop a calendar, just like we develop a school days calendar, we're going to develop an off school days calendar. We're closed on December 31st. Nobody's getting a key. Build district shut down, period.
And I would think it would be beneficial to do, like you said, on your, probably a couple days in the summer, and a couple days in the middle of winter, as opposed to every couple months, because in the fall and the spring, your heat and cooling costs aren't going to be as
Right.
high.
No, I'm sure, I'm confident we could develop a calendar of those days. We just have to sit down to do it.
Right. And then when someone
Schedule your in-service days in line with the power down days. I mean, like, there's lots of things you
Right,
can do.
there's different ways, exactly.
when
So,
that facilities use form comes in, if it hits a power down day, they just don't get to use that. They don't get.
well, no, what you
to
do is, if
They can
you,
pick another
if you,
day.
no, if you pre-plan it, when someone picks up the facilities use form, or if it's online, you say, please refer to this calendar. You may not use, they already know, 365 days out, you're not getting the building on July 7th. It's a Sunday in July, we're shutting down that day. Don't ask for it.
Right.
Saves that problem. I mean, it's just a logistics question to me, and then you just, because Ken can give you, we could give you the per diem savings within, a plus or minus 2% factor for every, I mean, Ken has those statistics.
Well, and, yeah, if you can sit with Ken and do the blackout days, I think that would be great.
I'm sure we can work up some kind of template as a tentative plan. That doesn't sound like, that's a logistics issue to me.
You just gotta look at holidays,
But I'm
like if
thinking-
you're closed on a holiday.
I would think, if you have a Friday or Monday holiday, that weekend before or after is an
Right.
ideal shutdown, because you've already got everything.
To be quite honest with you, I think we already do most of what you're suggesting. It's just probably not written on a piece of paper. And I'm sure Ken already computes those figures into the total costs that he's already budgeting. So I don't know how many additional days we would be squeezing out of making a calendar. So that's,
Right,
again, we'd have to look, you know what I'm
But
saying?
does Ken do the scheduling of the days, or is there, if somebody.
Well, no, that's why I'm
Right.
saying it's a logistics
Right.
issue. There's where you'd have to get everybody at the
Right.
table and say, okay, sports, okay, principals, okay, community groups, okay, district administration. We're all in the room together for this 3-hour meeting. We're going to build the blackout calendar. Tell me why I can't. Okay, athletics says, well, no, wait a minute, I got 20 teams coming in for this. And then, well, can't do it then.
Well, that's for this year. Next year, they can
Well,
plan
my-
to go somewhere else for that tournament or
But
whatever.
that's my point.
Right?
It's a logistics question. You just do it logistically and figure it out. And at least in my way of thinking, that's how I would tackle that
No, I
problem.
agree, and then from Ken, just see what the cost savings would be.
Yeah.
I think it'll be significant. Go ahead, Mr. Cockle.
I would also just ask Ken, the biggest thing is the sports, because I know the day after the holiday, those kids are in there in those gyms, and it is using a lot of heat and electricity to heat that huge gym. So if you could find out, it's costing the school district, $2,000, $3,000, or whatever that amount would be to, power that building up the day after Christmas. You might just have to make a decision, because really your sports are a gift to the students. I mean, the school board's given that, there's no state mandate or anything like that. They're already getting a huge benefit. I mean, especially with all these cuts, you guys have been, very generous with making sure these programs survive. So they have to make a sacrifice. Because I remember my daughter complaining, it was the day after.
Yeah, look, I mean, a week off. Look, I used to be an athlete. A week off isn't going to kill anybody in terms of being an athlete.
The day after Christmas, the day after every holiday, they got to be there at ungodly hours.
I mean, if it's going to save a significant amount of money to help save those sports programs, I think it's a no-brainer. And also, you should look at, and I brought this up about the Berkshire Red Sox and the baseball tournaments. You pay someone to come in on Sunday. Those tournaments are Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So, you're not collecting the fee for that.
No, but I think
But they're paying.
Yeah, who are they
They're
paying?
they're paying the township. They pay the coaches association.
The
Because
coaches
But
association,
that's the
not the
arrangement the
township.
township
Baseball.
makes. But
Yeah,
that's-
but
that's
Shane,
the
when
township
we looked
made
at
that
this
arrangement.
when we looked at this 2 years ago, or whatever, they did provide us a list of the things that they were paying for in terms of facilities, returfing the fields, rebuilding the mounds, batting cages, bases, a whole host of stuff. I think the number came up like $20,000 or in excess of that they were paying for and just giving to the school for using our facilities. So, do you charge them $20,000? You pay for that yourself, or do you have this symbiotic relationship that's at work here, where they're using our fields, but at the same time they're paying for all these improvements to the fields that for the wear and tear that they're putting on them.
My only point was they're paying the Danny Boone Coaches Association,
But that's because
but we're paying Kenny and his crew to be there on a Sunday on these tournaments and a Saturday on these tournaments. They got to clean up, they got to set up, and they got to clean up.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. My recollection was they were bussing their own stuff, and
Yeah, I can't wait on that.
Something changed.
Well, you know, and I can find out, because I happen to know a board member in Berkshire, so I
Yeah, I can't weigh in on that from our
run
end.
Of what they
And,
pay.
and my argument was, they're already paying. They were doing all that stuff, plus paying.
Right.
It's just that it was going to the Danny Boone Coaches Association instead of school district athletic program. So that money that, I'm not saying make them pay Danny Boone Coaches Association, which is not attached to the school district, and pay the school district. What I was saying is,
Okay.
they should bypass the Danny Boone Coaches Association and go into, you know, our athletic program. Not charge them more,
I know what you're saying.
but instead of it going over there for.
And it's just, Shane, I'm just saying, because we visited this before, I have to look at it again. I've got all that stuff sitting under my desk at home, and I don't want to keep these guys here for this conversation. But, you know, I thought we looked at this pretty darn closely. We had a big meeting out at the high school baseball fields to discuss it, and they handed me their audits for the last 3 years, and Ken handed me a list of materials that they had put in and what the costs were if we had done it. And we kind of sat back and looked at it and said, you know, everybody's benefiting from this relationship right now. So the board decided at that time it wasn't worth changing. Now, does that mean that we shouldn't look at it again? No, we should always be looking at these things. So, you know, I'd have to go back and review all that to just get in my brain what the relationships are, where the money's going, who's benefiting it, and how, and all that kind of stuff.
And honestly, they didn't use the fields that much this year. As much as normal. And part of that's because of the conditions of the field. I mean, they get nicer fields elsewhere.
Well, they're building a brand new facility, so.
Part of it is they purchased the facility out of their country.
Right, but they still have, I mean, they use fields all over. But they use like 20 fields every weekend. 25, I mean, they use
Well, from sun up to sundown, prior to that.
yeah.
I was going to hold that while you
All right, is there anything else?
I do have one more
Yes.
comment on the athletic budget. This year, we purchased new uniforms for football and cheerleading.
We did not purchase new football field stuff. That was the
We
boosters.
purchased uniforms there 3 years.
The boosters
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Okay, because my question was, when whoever purchases them, why would they purchase 50 of them? Why not purchase the ones that need to be replaced? Because
I hear what you're saying, and I think you need to have that conversation. I mean, if you were at the last finance committee meeting, I don't remember if you were or not, or at the last few board meetings, one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to understand the school district is spending X number of dollars on the program, right? And we're not paying for everything that those teams do.
right.
Okay? And the booster steps in with their fundraising efforts, and they're spending money on other parts of the program. And then we've got kids running around that are doing their own fundraising, and parents, and they're raising money, and that money is going into these like 37 accounts that are sort of controlled by the boosters and sort of controlled by the district, but not really by the district. So we're trying to get a handle on what's the total pot of money, where is it coming from, and who should be making decisions regarding what on those dollars,
Right.
okay? And because there's a Title IX implication to this stuff too, that the district needs to be aware of. So at the last Finance Committee meeting we had, Mr. Boyer was tabulating the amount of money that we spent on all of our activities, and then there was another column in the spreadsheet to say, what are the boosters spending on these things? And then we were going to try to figure out what the fundraising was going on with the individual teams, you know, that's being done by the kids. So we could put that all together and we could see and share with the public, well, look, this is what each sport, theoretically, or activity is raising in terms of funds. And this is, and as we told the boosters organization at the policy meeting that we had, we need to know what you're spending this stuff on. You know, tell us, you need to work with us. You need to tell us you're going to go out and spend $7,000 on football uniforms, because that could have a Title IX implication for us. We heard another parent complain that, I guess, the girls softball team, this is the third year in a row they're buying uniforms. I don't know, the school district isn't buying the uniform. Right. They're fundraising and they're buying those uniforms on their own. So, you know, from our perspective up here, it doesn't matter to us. We might want to know, what colors are they putting on their uniforms? What do the uniforms look like? That sort of thing. But, so that we're all sort of on board with that. They're not randomly changing the logos or something like that. But, those are decisions that we've had that conversation with our athletic facilitator. That's supposed to be pushed down to the coaches. We had it with the high school principal to say, you guys, high school principal and athletic facilitator, need to be reviewing these decisions, and you need to be held accountable for those decisions. And somebody should be reporting those things up to the board so that we're aware of them.
Right.
Okay? But in terms of the money, we're still working on that, right? The boosters are going to get you their information. They said they were going to.
Oh,
at the policy committee.
Yet, all yet, so I might have to reach out.
I'm meeting with them
The only
next week.
problem that I ever heard of personally
That's
from
still on?
the
We didn't adjourn
fundraising part is baseball, where before the season starts, they start the season maybe a month early to get kids warmed up. They have everyone trying out for baseball do fundraising, and then they cut those kids that do the fundraising. They don't make the team. There's one kid who raised $400, played middle school baseball. He gets cut. As a parent, I'd be pretty.
Look, I agree. I'm not disagreeing with you. I think there's been an accusation of mandatory fundraising, and I don't think that plays a role. It's my personal opinion. I don't think kids should have to go out and fundraise. I think you can communicate to them that it may be a necessary evil to keep the program, or not necessarily keep the program, but to
support it.
Support it, and to get new uniforms or to get new bats or whatever it is, or to be able to go to that tournament, we're going to have to fundraise for it. So as part of this team, if you want to do that, we need your help. I think that's just, you're kind of teaching them civic, service and things of that nature. There's a lesson in there as well that not everything's free. You have to work for it. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but I think to sit there and say it's mandatory, that's part of being a part of this team, that you have to go do this. There's nothing in the school code, or at least from the school board, directing
And there
that.
also will always be the mental, well, if I don't do any fundraising,
Will I play?
Will it be
Yeah.
held against my child?
Right. And it shouldn't be.
No, because
The coach shouldn't be, I don't think the coach should be.
In summer leagues, it may. In the school league, it shouldn't be.
right.
There should be a firewall. Look, there should be a firewall between what the kids are doing in terms of fundraising and what the coach knows. Like, the coach shouldn't know that student A raised $800 and student B raised $0. Why should a coach know that?
Because they get a packet of tickets, 20 tickets.
I hear you. I hear you. But what they ought to say is, here, you guys go sell it, and then that's it. The coach shouldn't be distributing the tickets. Maybe it's our athletic facilitator, it's a boosters person, or whatever it is that's managing this process. I don't know. We're going to figure that out. I mean, that's on the agenda for this year. We kind of want to figure out what's going on first, and how do we improve it? And what are other school districts doing that may be a good model for us to look at? And then, we'll decide that as a board, and we've shared a policy that Dr. Otto brought to our attention. Whose policy was that, by the way, that we?
York Suburban.
York Suburban. And did that come from you?
No, he's Conrad.
Okay.
Not Conestoga Valley.
Conestoga Valley. So we borrowed a policy that another school district, that came from Denny then?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm meeting with those groups next Tuesday.
Yeah, so Denny, our other interim business manager, had said, well, look, we faced this in our school district. This is what we did. And so we shared that with the boosters and said,
It's
look,
pretty tough. It's a
this
tough
is
policy.
kind of what we're looking to do, and give us your feedback on how this is going to work. So the idea is we want transparency in fundraising and how the funds are, and we want accountability so that everybody understands
And it's
who's
legal.
raising the money, who controls the money, and then third, we want to know how is the money being spent. These individual sports and boosters should be putting budgets together so that parents understand what they're fundraising for, that this was paid by the school district, this is what we're trying to achieve this year with our own funds, and this is why we're fundraising, and everybody knows, well, this is how much money was raised for funds. Did we raise more than we needed? Did we raise less than we needed?
We were talking about this
All
today.
that.
What did you say was the minimum that the school code requires for booster clubs?
Well, the minimum is that they report financially, an annual financial report to the school district.
They have to do that. They're required to do that.
It's required in the school code.
And I don't even think that's been happening.
No, neither one of our boosters organizations.
None
are
of
doing
them.
that.
We notified
PTCs, none of them
that-
do.
That And they
That
actually-
applies to the music boosters as well, right?
For
Yeah,
bands.
That applies to all of them.
Boosters.
All
Well,
of them.
look, they're gonna come into compliance. We had a policy committee meeting where just the sports boosters was here, and we told them that it's a requirement, okay? And they need to produce that information to the board, and not because we're trying to
Steal their
govern
money.
what they're doing, but that we need to understand what they're doing, and we need to bring them into compliance. And quite frankly, I think the music booster is a little bit more sophisticated, and they're going to need to come to the table as well because they need to share that information with us as well. In the past, the only way we've been able to get that is to pull up their audits that have been publicly recorded or whatever.
Well, they're
Yeah,
501c3s.
so we could see how much money they were fundraising, and that came to us from Bob New.
Bob
It didn't come
Newton
as-
figured that out.
from the foundation guy as opposed to from the boosters. So we need to get everybody in line. This is what we're talking about. So everybody's reporting, everybody's disclosing, everybody understands how much money is being raised and where it's being spent. The board isn't controlling the whole pot of money.
Yeah, and one more other quick thing with the fundraising. The other unfair thing, and it was baseball. It's the only one, football I never heard complaints, softball, but baseball was selling tickets before you're on the team. And second, the middle school money was going up to the high school. So the middle school that was doing the fundraising for the middle school team, they thought, was actually going up to the high school to put the money was going into the
Yeah, I mean, I
high
think
school.
the other part of this, though, Shane, is that parents are stakeholders in this, right? I mean, at some point, the parents have to stand up collectively and say, look, boosters or coach or whoever's managing this fundraising process, what are you doing with our money? Show me a budget. Show me what we're fundraising for. Show me how you're spending the money. Show me the receipts so I know that's what you spent the money on. And if you can't show me those things, we're not going to do it. Okay? And that conversation needs to take place. I mean, parents need to stand up for themselves and for their kids and be an advocate for themselves. Well, look,
Fear of the
there's only a fear if it's one parent in a team of 20. Collectively, 20 parents who control all 20 kids or whatever it is that play in that sport
Will make a difference.
will make a difference. You sit down with Michelle Goss, you sit down with Mr. Hankel, and you say, we're upset about this. You come to a board meeting, and you vote, you become a member of the Boosters organization, and you vote on who's running the Boosters. I mean, it's no different than putting a member on the board seat up here. As a citizen, as a taxpayer, you have a right to exercise your vote and have your voice heard. So you can do that by protesting at a meeting. You can do that by collectively coming together and saying, enough is enough. We're going to change the way things are being done here. And unfortunately, everything rolls up to 9 people, and it's assumed that we understand everything that's happening in the trenches and that we're somehow supposed to do it from the top. We need some grassroots support and help from that. And I mean, we got a month ago, I got a letter from somebody saying XYZ is going on with the football program, but I'm not going to give you my name or address or anything for fear of repercussions. Well, there's nothing I can do with that.
Yeah,
as a board
that's
member,
yeah.
right. I mean,
Or administratively.
it's just junk, right? There's nothing I can do to substantiate that complaint. There's nothing that I can do to help. If it is really a problem, all it is somebody, I don't know.
You pass it on.
There's
All you can
nothing we
do is
with
pass it on.
You throw it away. That's all I can do with it. You know what I mean? So people need to stand up and have their voice heard and demand accountability. And they need to grab their neighbor or their kid's best friend's, parent and say, how do you feel about this? Come with me to the next school board meeting. Go to the next boosters meeting with me because I don't like the way things are happening around here.
Right.
That's how you get change.
That's what I tell them, Andrew.
Well, you're not the only one I've heard complain about it. So I need more of you need to put your arm, lock arms and show up and start making some noise if you don't like what's happening because we don't control the
I don't
boosters.
have anyone in baseball.
I'm just saying though, but like in general, the school district doesn't control what happens on the boosters level. They're a separate 501c3.
Right, but when the coach, the boosters is
We're gonna get to the bottom of it with the coaches and with our athletic facilitator. Okay, they have certain jobs that they're supposed to be doing, and that came up in our policy committee meeting. Is what role are coaches supposed to be playing in fundraisers, and what role are they not supposed to be playing?
Maybe the coaches should just go through the booster.
I've never seen anything like this in my life. To be quite frank with you, I've never seen anything like this in my life. Where you have a coach who's a district employee who's directing fundraising efforts through a 501(c) that we don't have any interest in, and then deciding how those monies are being spent.
And our baseball coach is a Twin Valley school teacher.
Well, he's still our coach.
Right, he's still our coach, but I mean,
We pay him to coach baseball, so he's still our employee. But I'm just saying, like, there's a lot here that needs to be worked on, and we are looking at it. But we meet, 22 times or 20 times a year.
And I've told parents too, because they'll say, well, I don't come to the board about it. We don't even know what's going on. We don't know what happens on the baseball field, or that this coach, his son plays 99% of games and he stinks and kid. I don't know. I don't really care. I can't control that. And we have X amount of time in a day, and that's it. If we're made aware of things, we can try to address them if they're substantiated. But in my job, when I get anonymous complaints, you know where they go? They're trash, because I can't address them.
Right.
So.
Look, we want to fix the problems, but I think parents have to really step up and help us.
Well, I mean, in fairness, I've been to some meetings where parents have come to the board and spoken publicly. Really nothing.
But what happens after that public, I think the problem where there's a disconnect, Shane, is people come up and we are listening. I'm listening. I take notes. He gets the emails from me afterwards. And quite frankly, I don't send him very nice emails sometimes, okay? And he doesn't deserve it. But I hear stuff, and I get angry because I'm like, what the Sam Hill's going on around here? And I blast Dr. Otto. Or I blast our business office or whoever. And I
never take it personally, by the way.
You saw what happened here with the consortium stuff, right? And that's not even something I was angry about. It's just I start hammering people with lots of questions that demand accountability, and there's a lot of scrambling around going on, and then sometimes it turns out to be much ado about nothing. And so we've raised the alarm over something that wasn't really an issue. And what we don't have happening a lot of times is parents consistently coming forward with specifics on what is happening, why it's happening that way, and then who did what, so we can get to the bottom of it. We've hauled coaches and people in front of us to talk about these things, and it's very hard to substantiate that stuff if parents aren't stepping forward to help us. They come out and they complain in a public meeting, and then they disappear, and they don't put it in writing, right? Or give us specifics as to what the incident. I can't tell you how many times nobody is willing to put it in writing because of fear of retribution or something else. But somebody's got to be willing to stand up sooner or later to change the culture. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with it. I would think, in my personal opinion, if you're the loudest and the most vehement person out there, and you can publicly state, if my kid suffers a consequence for me speaking out, you're really going to hear about it, right? Let just put everybody on notice, coaches included, that don't target my kid. You target my kid, there's going to be consequences to this, litigious or something else. That's going to get people's attention. Maybe you're putting up a shield then around your kid that says, "Hey, look, make sure if he's still playing, he ought to better still be playing."
Right.
That's what I would do. If my kid was somehow in there, I'd be the biggest advocate I possibly could for him.
And the kids that aren't playing, they just, they look at it like, if they complain, the coach is just going to use it. Well, they're just mad because they're not getting the same playing time, and
there's a lot.
So
to
it's
it.
like, why bother?
There's
But it's tough.
Look, you've heard this board say it 100 times. Kids should not be punished for their parents speaking up, or a board member speaking up, or a faculty member speaking up. They should be left out of those conversations 100%. That gets me, that really boils my blood when I hear that. And we got to break that culture. If it's ingrained in the system here, we got to break it.
That was it.
All right. Meeting adjourned.
9:35.
Sorry to keep you guys.
Not a problem.